Good evening, race fans, and welcome back to TRTN for tonight's coverage of the XCL Pro Series Round 5. As always, I'm Regan Clark. You join us here in the land down under, here at the season midway at the mighty Mount Panorama Circuit, located right here on the outskirts of the historic mining town of Bathurst, New South Wales, Australia. Founded in 1938 and consisted of 3.8 miles and 23 turns of FIA Grade 3. Mount Panorama is a motorsports icon here in Australia, home of the Bathurst 1000 and the Bathurst 12 Hour. It is a circuit unlike any other the world has ever seen, and today it lays claim to round 5 of the championship. Getting a look at the calendar, of course, it's the last time you'll be hearing from us here on TRTN before we hand back over to the folks at XCL TV, who'll be with you for the entire second half of the Pro Series Championship from the 20th of December onwards. I must say, it has been a real pleasure for us to be able to broadcast for the folks at XCL, as this championship has been second to none. And getting straight into it right before the end of free practice, we've got about 8 minutes 50 seconds left to go. You join us right here in the final 10 minutes of free practice before we're on to one hell of a qualifying session, if my data is not lying to me. Let's get a look with the driver out on track. Here we see with Daniel Karlborg as we start to discuss what has gone on over the course of the last round just gone. Well, reeling out of what was a very close top 3 heading into round 4 in Schuyler County, New York State in Watkins Glen International, we find ourselves with a broadly different situation, as reeling from his 3rd race win of the season, now up to a 75% win rate for Fats GT Esports' Wilson Gige, we find ourselves looking at it here with a 37-point gap between himself and Velocity Racing's Tyler Vermack in second place. Tadeusz Lichka, who led in round 4, now finds himself to 3rd and only 2 points ahead of Tobias Sievert in 4th place with the XCL Esports team. Rounding out the top 5 and on the rise, I should add, is Ben Rook with Simplay Racing, the number 14 Lamborghini, now with 111 points, make 5th ahead of Melvin Milliston with Velocity Racing in 6th. Jake Garrett in 7th with the Euro Titans team. Nicholas Dahl with Frantic Motorsports in 8th. Levi Warner in 9th with Fats GT, and rounding out the top 10, Joachim Eriksson with Frantic Motorsports BMW, the 333 with 74 points. As you've seen from the points distribution there, it has been an incredibly close top 10 coming into the season midway, with a lot left to fight for and a lot more to be had in today's event. Looking at the regs coming into today's event, as a matter of fact, getting onto that discussion, we find ourselves here in the twin hour format. We're in for 2 hours of racing here at Mount Panorama. This is going to be a big one, ladies and gents. The last 2 hour I believe we had in this season was back at round 2 at the Red Bull Ring, and this is going to be a serious follow-up act to that. Of course, 15 minutes of qualifying as per, with 1 mandatory pit stop, with the fuel being the mandate, a minimum stop of 25 seconds. Expecting to see pit stops around, if not slightly lower than the expected time we got from the data out of last round, at round 4 of the championship over in Watkins Glen International. Looking around the grid then, let's see if we can get a look with how the timings are concerned. Alex Medrano of the AM Racing team, or the AM Racing team, the number 40 Mercedes car, has dominated throughout free practice, and we've been keeping a close eye on this one over the course of what has been the last nearly 60 minutes of free practice before we get into qualifying today. Close on his trails and looking to make amends here by 0.02 of a second in the last recorded times to the chart there. Toby Cyril of VXS Motorsport is gunning for pole position in the qualifying to follow. Bear in mind, they'll have but a fraction of the time they've had in free practice to make true on these ideas. Fabio Farr in 3rd place with Exclusive, with Tadeusz Lichka in 4th, Carlos Disch in 5th, Chris Farris 6th, Wilson Gige, the championship lead, in 7th toward the end of free practice today. Joachim Eriksson in 8th with Nicholas Dahl 9th. Tyler Vermack rounds out the top 10 on those times, and get a look at the spread there for the times out past that second place spot. Of course, the front row divided by only 0.02 of a second. You take a look here and we're at about 150 thousandths between Farr and Lichka. That's 1/10 and 500ths. Then you look further down the road, you can see that we're looking only in the range of about, looking at it here, that's 53 thousandths between Lichka and Disch towards the back of the top 5. Velocity and 5-star still very, very close indeed heading into this forthcoming qualifying session. Looking at the balance of performance for today, with all hopes that it's correct, the only one erroneous note we have here is for that of Lexus. Sadly, with no data, we've been forced to go off of the last given example, which was 19 kilos reduced in the Watkins Glen International circuit. Fortunately, so it seems, doesn't appear to be the case that we have any Lexuses on the grid to disprove this. Otherwise, looking further around though, Ferrari lose 15 kilos for Lexus. Ferrari lose 19 kilos coming into this race, with Porsche losing 14, so rather relevantly there, as we see for Fabio Farr leaving the pit lane. He'll be seeing great advantage under balance of performance today. Of course, this is all sourced from the exclusive balance of performance listings and also from the in-game data we've been able to sample over the course of free practice today. BMW will lose 8 kilos coming into round 5 of the championship, with Mercedes losing 3. Aston Martin, the first of our positives, then gaining 2, with Lamborghini gaining 6, McLaren gaining 19, and Ford gaining 22. So as ever, the Blue Oval find themselves at a direct disadvantage, but as we've seen already, this has done very little to stem the tide. Set in stone by several drivers, among them has been that of Wilson Gige, currently finds himself from the pit lane. Discussing that gap then, 37 points is not a particularly large gap in any other championship, but given how airtight things have been, especially looking in that top 10, this is a monstrous gap by relative comparison, and it's not particularly hard to see where that's come from. Of course, he's obtained, after that last round just gone, he's obtained a 75% win rate, having led 25 laps of 32 in the last round alone. It's hardly a secret on what's kept him in the stead of this championship, what's allowed him to dominate under these conditions. It's been brutal consistency, constant pressure from the folks around him, and clinical precision that has allowed him to carve his way to the front of the pack by a landslide. And with the hopes right now for him to potentially take a 4th race win this season, there's still ample chances here, but it's not looking particularly grand when you consider pace alone this time around. He's 9th after the most recent run of qualifying times. Most recently, I think, has gone up in front of him there, Alberto Aragoneses in the number 194. We actually saw him a little earlier on today in the HCCL Carousel Cup, as a matter of fact, when he raced with Mercedes. Now he's behind the wheel on the number 194 SRC Motorsports BMW on his way up and around the mountain. We'll get a look around the course in a moment's time. As a matter of fact, who better to get on board with than that of Fabio Farr? Let's go and catch on board proper with the Porsche on his way down towards turn 1 to give you a comprehensive breakdown then of this fantastic venue. Heading down towards turn 1 at Hell Corner, named for originally having a tree stump on the inside, then its opening years of motorcycle races hit said stump. I'd say it's pretty obvious where they'd be going off to. Turn 2 then we'll be heading up to in a moment's time when we make our way up of one of 2 largest straights here on this circuit, up the mountain straight, as it were, up towards turn 2 at Griffin's Bend, named after Martin Griffin, the then mayor of Bathurst, who was a visionary behind the track's construction back in the 1930s. Heading in towards the cutting now, turns 3 and 4. We stay on board here with Fabio Farr. Now heading up round Quarry Corner. Actually, it's come so thick and fast there. Quarry Corner named because there is a quarry. Reed Park named after Bathurst City engineer Huey Reed. Solomon Park named after the nature park of the same name. Out through McPhillamy Park, named after Walter J. McPhillamy, the previous mayor of Bathurst. Down through Skyline, now sometime called Brock Skyline, named after the Australian motorsports legend Peter Brock. Some misconception is that Skyline could have been a reference to the Nissan Skyline that dominated in the Australian Touring Car Championship, but the naming has a much more literal meaning as it overlooks the skyline of the city of Bathurst. Forest Elbow, we're just out of there, named after Arthur Roland Jack Forrest, an Australian motorcycle racer. And down the Conrod Straight, now this is just shy of 2 kilometres, 1.9 I believe it to be, and this was named after a famous incident in the 1939 Easter race for Frank Kleinig, in which his Kleinig Hudson race car threw a Conrod whilst flat out on this straight. His engine failure has been forever immortalised in the naming. Down towards the chase then, turns 21 and 22 here, as we find ourselves on what used to be called the Caltex chase, named after the petrol company Caltex. Down toward Murray's Corner then, turn 23, named after Australian racing driver Bill Murray, who crashed his Hudson at this very corner back in 1946. And that is definitely a lot more than I was expected to process in just such a short amount of time. Fabio Farr to the line, a 201.587 with just under a minute left to go in free practice. We'll be heading on to qualifying, sadly again with no data to go off of, but taking a look at the timings here, it does give us a pretty clear image as to who to expect in that top 5. I mean, we're talking drivers out of Velocity, AM Racing, VXS, Exclusive and 5-Star, all teams to watch. And if we're talking drivers in particular, here's one of them, Fabio Farr, subbing in the number 96 Porsche. Also keep an eye for Toby Cyril. He's been a routine flyer of the top 5 throughout qualifying, at least in the times we've been able to cover. We've seen that he's already cemented himself as quite a capable talent in qualifying alone. This is a most peculiar one because this is, at least for us here on TRTN, the first time we've ever seen this one here. Alex Medrano of the AM Racing team, and he leads by 65 thousandths towards the end of free practice today. So high hopes for Medrano in the number 40 heading into qualifying. Tadeusz Lichka, the previous championship leader, heading into round 4, now heading out of round 4, he drops to 3rd, but with high hopes to potentially return in later rounds of the championship. This, of course, being the staging point right here at the season midway. And keep an eye out there for the ace in the hole of the 5-star esports team, the 54 Aston Martin of Carlos Disch. This one has been a serious stern customer over the course of the last couple of rounds, and keep a close ear to the ground for news out of that Aston Martin, because I expect another top 5 appearance coming up not far from now. Keep an eye as well, Alberto Aragoneses. We already saw his talents on display in the XCL Carousel Cup. Now we get to see what he can do in the GT3s today in the XCL Pro Series once again for SRC Motorsports. Of course, it would be naive to not include the likely candidates as well. You know, Chris Farish and Wilson Gige for that matter. Gige especially, keep an eye on him during the race itself. It looks like potentially either sandbagging or just somewhere in the lack of confidence for pace. But I think it's the former. I don't think this is 100% of what we've seen out of Wilson Gige. This is him taking things nice and easy, kicking his feet back a little bit before he has to get serious. And get serious he will, because now, with 15 minutes of qualifying underway, you can see he is not wasting any time, and neither is the rest of that grid, as all of them rocket out of the pit lane in almost unison there. As we scroll around to try and find the front runners here, you'll be looking up towards, by the looks of it there, Frantic Motorsports' BMW. I believe that to be there. Joachim Eriksson leading us down towards turn 2 at Griffin's Bend. So with any luck here, Frantic have been looking for more routine top 10 appearances, and you can see quite a few of their drivers are now present factors of the top 10 in the championship. Taking a look there, a few names that cross our desk. You've seen Nicholas Stahl and Joachim Eriksson now 8th and 10th in the championship. They sandwich Levi Warner in 9th place for Fatch GT Esports. Now, a few drivers I want to discuss whilst we get underway in qualifying. We'll stay on board with Joachim Eriksson for the first of our flying laps. Right now, we're on outlap territory. To bring this one up, a few drivers to point out has been the rise of Ben Rook. And you see him right now tucked in behind the 333. That's the number 14 Lamborghini. He's now up to 5th in the championship as the only in the top 10 currently competing for the Simplay Racing team. The nearest one to him is all the way outside of the top 15. So as what is almost a solo act for him, he's finding himself representing Simplay Racing's available talents by his lonesome. The British talent finds himself 5th ahead of Melvin Millicent, who we've already seen has carved out a serious reputation for talent over on the NLRL Sunday League. Some other drivers to keep a close eye on as well. Tyler Vermack, he entered round 4 of the championship, 5th place in the championship, but heading out of it, he's now 2nd and only 37 points off of leading in his final season with Velocity Racing. Of course, as it's very well known that he was signed by the exclusive esports team, this is his sort of last hurrah, as it were, for Velocity Racing, and he is doing a very, very serviceable job, finding himself up the road from his teammate and former championship lead, Tadeusz Lichka. Well, we'll stay on board here with Joachim Eriksson because we're about to get underway with the flying laps here in Bathurst. We're on board with Frantic Motorsports' number 333 car as we make our way down towards Hell Corner. Keep a close eye on those BMWs today. This is definitely something that I want to bring up quite a few times over the course of this stream, is going to be the importance in this straight, the Mountain Straight, and contrarily, the Conrod Straight. Or I suppose conversely, the Conrod Straight heading out of Forest's Elbow. And that is going to be the case of straight line speed, because BMW find themselves right now only opposed by, say, I would probably put it out there as to one other brand on this grid capable of going pound for pound in terms of straight line speed. That's the Ford Motor Company with their 7th generation Ford Mustang. Those two are absolute bullet trains. And as we saw back in Watkins Glen, it was pretty clear and pretty evident of just how fast they were in a straight line. Some other brands to keep an eye on as well. McLaren, stability concerns have been at an all-time high for McLaren throughout this championship. This is going to be no different. Bathurst is a very unique circuit in my mind, and that's because, you know, with a lot of circuits, it's a case of a love-hate relationship. I don't find that with Bathurst. You can talk about love-hate relationships all you want. Brands, Zolder, Nürburgring, Kota, all of these tracks have a love-hate relationship in the ACC community. All of these tracks are either loved or hated, and there's nothing in between. They all have their reasons, of course. You know, Brands is narrow and old-fashioned, Zolder is complicated and small, Nürburgring is vast and expansive, and Kota is muddled. But Bathurst is all of these things, and that's why it's not a track that is hated or avoided out of preference or reviled. The only single governing factor in who races here and who doesn't is fear. It is the bane of all racing talent, this circuit. It is a track that must be respected before it is ever conquered, and those who trifle with this balance have met the walls at tremendous speed, and their races have fizzled out before they realise the mistake they've made. So this is a very fine balancing act we find ourselves, especially in the talks for McLaren. I mean, a few notes here as well. Kevin Estre once described this circuit as half Nordschleife, half Macau. Alexandre Premat once coined it as being a mix of the Nordschleife, Petit Le Mans, and Laguna Seca. Really, where our drivers land right now is, as turn 1 would indicate, hell. Well, looking at these times then, let's see how they roll in, and with Alex Medrano leading by a landslide right off the bat, 0.6 of a second over Carlos Diche, and as we see there, here comes Wilson Gige saying hello with 0.04 of a second clear of the 40 Mercedes of Medrano. Cyril third fastest there, really not too far off either, 157 thousandths of a second between himself and the front row. Then looking down the line, that puts Diche in 4th, Appleton to 5th, Rook 6th, Lichka 7th, Wagstaff in 8th, with Ericsson 9th. That's now forced down a peg as Jan Bettentrup of the 5-star esports team takes 8th off of Wagstaff and Ericsson respectively. And he too is forced down a peg because across the line a moment ago went Alberto Aragoneses. Number 41 next to the line, that was Stephen Sutton subbing in for Anthony Velorio. He's 16th there. Lee Hemming having crossed the line a moment ago. He's 13th after that last lap. You also see another driver subbing, actually not subbing in. This is Matthew Copsey, but it's just a bit of a bizarre color scheme here. We're used to seeing Copsey in the yellow and white of the high caliber racing colors. He actually finds a little bit closer to his own personal brand here, as we actually last saw this color scheme on his M2 last weekend when he took an inaugural win in the Carousel Cup. So this is a bizarre one for the 97. More on that later on, though. 96 nearest to the line. Let's see if we can catch on board with them just before the end of their first flying lap. It's Fabio Farr from 23rd. Seemingly to put no time on the chart there, so a little bit of a fast for him. You have to go around the track one more time. Bear in mind, time is a fickle structure in this race. Only 2 minutes per lap. Now, that feasibly gives us in and around the range of 7.5 laps. 8 if you really push the envelope out. But our drivers will be playing things a lot closer to the chest here, knowing, like another track in particular, the Nürburgring, that your mistakes will have huge ramifications in qualifying, because it will, in the time it takes to repair them, slice the available time in qualifying down by nearly half. A whole swarm of times coming in, among them the 23 of Wilson Gige. He's led the session so far by 0.2 of a second, but now Toby Cyril says, I'll have that right off you, and almost perfectly equalizes the gap to 222 thousandths of a second. 0.2, 200ths, 2 thousandths. 991 across the line a moment ago as well, among several other times to join the charts there. And that was Rob Appleton, 7th fastest for Onid Racing. You can see his teammate, that I believe to be Neil Wagstaff, making his way out of the pits there in the 993. And 194 across the line a moment ago, and Aragoneses is up more positions, up to 4th now for SRC Motorsports. This is where he's really found quite the spring in his step today. But there is still that conversation to be had of the number 40, who dominated throughout free practice, but working with a fraction of the time he's had available. This could be the make or break for Alex Medrano and the AM Racing team. Heading down through Skyline. So picking back up on a few of these issues then on the topic earlier from discussing cars. Obviously, stability issues are at an all-time high for McLaren. They've had this constant pressure of this almost curb anxiety we've seen out of McLarens in more recent events. And that's because these cars are still quite flaky, even for mid-engine machinery. They find themselves having to be a little bit more hesitant over the curbs because there is that incredible risk of a spin-out because these cars are so sharply put together. Another concern as well is going to be in the direction of Porsche, and we've seen, at least over on the NLRL Console Endurance Series, which also ran Porsches, actually Fabio Farr knows plenty enough of this because he and Tyler Vermack in their twin set of the Porsche took that win in the 4 Hours of Bathurst most recently. They know the tremendous gamble it requires to field a Porsche 911 on this circuit. You're already treading on thin ice. All this is doing is adding very thick spikes to the bottom of your proverbial shoes. We've seen seen most recently, though, a move up to the fastest time by 5 thousandths. Alex Medrano to fastest for the AM Racing team. The margins could not be thinner if you tried. 5 thousandths between himself and Toby Cyril. Wilson Gige third by 100th of a second. Andre Damrat subbing in for the exclusive esports team finds himself in 4th fastest ahead of another sub-driver, that being Fabio Farr, who you can see there, unlike his performance in the 4 hours of Bathurst, is finding things much more pear-shaped. And that is the make or break nature of Bathurst as a circuit. It is a terrifying spectacle indeed to try and lap this circuit by your lonesome when you're expecting in the next 6 minutes to be taking on this circuit headstrong with 26 other drivers around you. That is pure fear. So you see here the 147, Toby Cyril, the last chance for the Ford Motor Company to maintain their winning streak in quali. Chris Rook in the chat there saying evening all, and good evening to everyone joining us here in the last 5 minutes of qualifying for round 5 of the XCL Pro Series. This has been a real doozy here in New South Wales, Australia. 5 thousandths of a second, a dividing factor between first and second. Ford versus Mercedes here. Alex Medrano, seemingly the dark horse of this championship in the number 40 Mercedes, has taken competition by storm, first through free practice where he led by hundredths, and now here where he leads by thousandths. The margins could not get thinner, and it's still far from over. From where he stands, it's about 2 more laps before the end of his qualifying endeavours, and if he really pushes the envelope out, he'll be in time for a 3rd lap by the time the event clock runs over. You can see there, tucked in behind, that's the 789 of Andre Damrat. We can see is one of the, I believe that to be one of the VXS Ferraris. That's Ellison Williams and the number 149. Following in his wake there, you can see is Medrano. And then in the background, that's Tadeusz Lichka with the Velocity team down in 7th place. We'll see, though, Medrano to the line in the number 40. With Damrat up in front of him there from 4th place, stays there. Medrano to the line. Can he open it up from 5 thousandths as he gets across the line? Sadly, doesn't appear to be the case this time around. It does leave things open for Wilson Gige. He makes his way currently down through the S's and the Dipper, down towards Forest's Elbow. Now, this is an area of the track that has sparked so much fear, so much anxiety in the drivers, because you have to nail it. The importance of this section, it doesn't matter if you have a fantastic final or a fantastic first. If you can't conquer the mountain will conquer you. The case for Wilson Gige, we see he's pumping the brakes here, so he's coiling himself up, trying to put some heat in the tires here. This coiling up almost like a king cobra would, getting ready to strike. But he's got a very thin margin to clear, and so far he's not had even a smidge in on it. 15 thousandths is far less than the average human reaction time, which sits in and around 1/10 to 1/10.5 of a second. So this is really it's beyond human levels what we're dealing with here. The margins are so thin, you or I, as an average person, could not comprehend them if placed in the real space. You can only comprehend what the data tells you, and what we're seeing right now is some of the closest margins to bring us to the end of a qualifying session. 3 minutes left to go. Gige's onto another lap. We'll catch up with him in a little while's time. Let's catch on board with the nearest driver to the line, though, the number 97 of Matthew Copsey. From 21st on the field, crosses the line there and stays 21st. The margins between himself and Jan Bettentrup to make a top 20 start to this race currently reside at about 170 thousandths of a second. That's 1/10 and 700ths. Some other close gaps I want to draw attention to as well. 107 thousandths of a second between Lichka and Deesh. That's on the 4th row right now. We've also seen most recent improvements there. Ben Rook up to 5th. We've just seen there was an improvement for Aragonese. He's back into the top 10 there. He was briefly at the height of his qualifying in 4th. Now he's in 8th place. You can see emerging alongside him there. That's the 5-star BMW. I believe that to be Jan Bettentrup alongside him as they make their way up the mountain straight. We've just seen as well most recent improvement for Andre, as it was Andre Damrat there. He is now 4th fastest. Lichka 5th fastest there. So he's gone up and ahead of Ben Rook. And it's a Ford 2, 3, 4, and 5. If I were in a Mercedes right now, I would not be feeling so comfortable, because the blue oval has come with a vengeance here, and they are not happy with their top spot being hogged. But all fair play, though, to Alex Medrano. It is very rare. Currently thinking about the state of Ford dominance in this championship, to see any one brand come through and make even a dent on the near flawless record Ford has held in qualifying this season. For Mercedes to be, of all brands, the one to come through to do it, that's impressive. I suppose it really does go to show there is very little replacement for displacement. Ford kicking out a 5.4 litre based off the Ford Coyote motor. This one is, I believe, a 6.3 litre naturally aspirated V8 based off the one from the SLS. There was a common misconception from us here on TRTN that was the 4-litre M178 engine that's used in the GT4 and road cars. No, this is actually the older 6.3 used out of 6.2 or 6.3, I believe it is, but it's the one from the Mercedes SLS, which I stand high upon the pedestal to say is one of the best cars Mercedes has ever produced. I will not have that as an argument. This is not a too shabby a following act. On his way down the Conrad, then you can see Lichka up the road from him, now having since made his way into the top 5. You can see the gap between himself and Andre Damrat to be within a spot of that second row is 160 thousandths of a second, a tenth and 600ths there. Did I say 160 hundredths? 160 thousandths, I should say. Yes. You can see he's pumping the brakes, so it's going to be one last lap available for Medrano. As he crosses the line with mere seconds to spare, this could make for quite an interesting last draw here. Cyril still within 5 thousandths of that fastest time. We are talking times in alien territory here. 2 minutes, .205 is absolutely nothing to scoff at here. And to have 3 drivers separated by beneath the average human reaction time, or even as a matter of fact, the time it takes for you to blink, is a remarkable feat this late on into the championship. And we've still got a whole second half to play with. And that'll be live over on XCL TV for the remainder of the season. But for our final foray here on TRTN for this championship, this has been one hell of a qualifying session, and we're still far from over. We'll catch on with the 147 in a moment's time. We catch in with Carlos Dish from the back of the top 10 here for 5-Star Esports. He finishes off his qualifying session in 8th as he makes an improvement there by 7 thousandths over the nearest car, being Chris Grad of Blaze Motorsports in the 78. Nearest to the line then comes Wilson Gige. Can it be up to pole? Not this time around. But he'll still be in a powerful position to play with. He's in 3rd at the best of times towards the end of qualifying today. Nearest to the line, we get on board with a 97 on the exit of the chase. This is Matthew Copsey with High Caliber Racing. Round Murray's, toward the line he goes. Cross the line, stays 19 for the end of qualifying. Here comes the 147. So this is the last hope for anyone to take pole position off of Alex Medrano. Can Toby Cyril be the one to do it? Across the line he goes, and he does it! Up to pole position by 28 thousandths. But bear in mind, the 40, if memory does not mistake me, is still out on the track. So there could be fight back here. Nearest to the line, Alberto Aragoneses to 6th. From behind him, we can see that I believe that to be Jan Bettentrup to the line. The 789 follows in his wake. Andre Damrat to the line. But here comes Medrano. In front of him there, the 149 of Ellison Williams. But here comes Medrano. Can it be pole? No, it can't. 28 thousandths, your dividing factor. And Toby Cyril on pole. Unbelievable. We thought that a glass ceiling too high to shatter. No thanks, says VXS. What a qualifying session indeed then, folks. More on that in a moment's time. We'll be on to our discussion on the news and the grid for round 5 of the championship. What a session indeed. Toby Cyril on pole. Alex Medrano a very close second. Wilson Gige, the championship lead, divided front to back from the podiums here by less than a tenth of a second. You couldn't ask for a better quali. So before we get onto the grid, we've got a few articles of news to discuss, and from a variety of championships, mind you, as well. In Formula E, Jake Dennis wins the Sao Paulo E-Prix for Andretti Formula E, and it's the first race of the brand new season just before the end of the Gen 3 Evos, and onto the exciting chapter next year for the Gen 4 cars. Do look forward to that. It's going to be a very fun final season for the Gen 3 Evos. In Formula 1, Max Verstappen on pole for the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. It's a 3-way split towards the final round of the championship. It's going to be a very exciting race tomorrow. It's all down to the wire between Piastri, Verstappen and Norris. Who comes out on top? Only time will tell. Our last article of news then comes from the World Rally Championship as Hyundai reveal their 2026 lineup. Returning from last year, Thierry Neuville and Adrian Formeau. And then we also find Hayden Paddon, Danny Sordo and Esa-Pekka Lappi. So that's all for the news, and now for the grid in our final time covering an event here on the XCL Pro Series. It's been a real pleasure from us. Let's get on to the grid then. 2 hours of racing to follow here in the land down under. Toby Cyril on pole position for VXS Motorsports with Alex Medrano in second. Wilson Gige in third with Andre Damrat in fourth place. Tadeusz Lichka rounds out the top five with Alberto Aragoneses in sixth. In seventh place, Fabio Farr with Carlos Disch in eighth, Chris Grad in ninth, and Ben Rook to round out the top 10. Rob Appleton in 11th place ahead of Freno Radic in 12th. Nicholas Dahl in 13th place ahead of Martijn van Manen in 14th place. 15th goes to Joachim Eriksson of Frantic Motorsports. He's up the road from Matthew Williams of Fats GT. Tyler Vermack in 17th. Chris Farish in 18th. Matthew Copsey in 19th. And Neil Wagstaff in 20th place. Jan Bententrup in 21st with James Mason in 22nd. Stephen Sutton subbing in for Anthony Valorio at the High Caliber Racing Teams in 23rd. He's up the road from Lee Hemming in 24th. Daniel Carborg in 25th with Ellison Williams in 26th. Nico Shaska rounds out a 27-car grid, and that seemingly has dropped down to 26 there, because so I've seen that. I think that was a disconnect on the grid just a moment ago. Bit of a bizarre one. We'll have to catch up with who exactly has been fell victim. You can see the gap there on the field, as a matter of fact. We'll see who's fallen victim of that in a moment's time. Getting on board, though, we have Toby Cyril on that fantastic end to his qualifying session. He is set to lead the pack here on the start of 2 hours of racing. It is 5:02 p.m. local time here in Bathurst, New South Wales. At the time of recording from the commentary box, it's 8:21 p.m. in the evening here in the UK. What a time to be alive. What a qualifying session indeed. Out through turn one, you can see it is still Ford City here for that top five. 4 of those 5 positions comprised of machines built by the folks at the Blue Oval. That 7th generation Mustang has been a dominant figurehead of GT3 racing here on Assetto Corsa Competizione, and it is not hard to see where the love comes from. So on board with Toby Cyril, leading that charge. Medrano second, Gige third, Damrat fourth, Lichka fifth. It's an ultra competitive top 5. You're looking at all V8 Thunder, and there'll be some thunder down under when we go racing in a moment's time. The only erroneous example of things then, that Mercedes with its slightly larger 6.2 or 6.3 litre engine from the older SLS. They're up against the newer generation 5.4 litre Coyote motor that's been up-tuned by the folks at Ford Performance, and also in collaboration with M Sport Ford for the production of this vehicle. A lot of tweaks having gone on in the background by the folks at Multimatic, the same mad scientists behind the Porsche 963's chassis. This was the perfect recipe, and it's not hard to see where Ford has gone right with this one. They've taken a lot of gambles in the real-life development for the Mustang. It would have been very easy to develop another mid-engine car and bring back the GT like they did back in GTE, but Ford doesn't find themselves sullied by convention. Whilst mid-engine cars are on the rise, they stick to what they understand. And with this Mustang, they really did throw it in on the deep end. It made its debut at the 24 Hours of Daytona. That is not an easy event to come away with a decent result. Most manufacturers crash and burn on a 24-hour event on debut. I mean, look no further than Alpine. Their debut 24 Hours of Le Mans, both cars were up in smoke. Then, this year, they won in Fuji. And similar an example, Ford has been on the rise with this Mustang. Make no mistake of it, this is the next generation of front-engine dominance, and it's heralded by the forefathers of the production car. Looking around the field, though, there's plenty of examples of manufacturers to keep a close eye on. We see some of the people who have disconnected. That was Matthew Williams of Fats GT, who found himself in trouble. The 923 starts from the pit lane, perhaps spared from the wrath to ensue here in Bathurst. Looking around that top 10 just quickly here before we get on to the Conrod Straight. Of course, Mercedes to consider, but also some manufacturers here out past the blue wave of Ford machinery. We do find BMW, Porsche, Aston Martin, and Lamborghini among several examples there. Is Carlos Disch with 5 Star Esports, currently set to line up just behind Fabio Farr, who we've seen is no stranger to Bathurst. We saw that 4 hours of Bathurst race where he and Tyler Vermack on their Console Endurance Series debuts, mind you, for the exclusive esports team, went on to dominate that event. It was a tremendous gamble to bring Porsche their first ever victory in the Console Endurance Series. Can they do it in the XCL Pro Series? One does wonder. Well, we'll be scratching our heads in a veil of that answer later down the line. But one thing is for certain, we have 2 hours of racing to decide the fates of this grid, and heralding its arrival, the 147 VXS Mustang of Toby Cyril. Not far then from the start of this race. This is set to be a fantastic round of the championship just before the end of the first half and just before the end of coverage for 2025. The next event will be on December 20th at round 6 before they wrap, before they head into 2026 for the next available coverages. Well then, without further ado, it has been a real pleasure from us here on TRTN, but let's get the show on the road here. Heading down towards the line, 27 cars in all for round 5 of the XCL Pro Series. It's Thunder Down Under here in Bathurst. Leading the charge, Toby Cyril, 2 hours against the clock, and we're green and racing here in Bathurst. A tremendous start from the front row. Alex Medrano looking around the outside, but Cyril covers him off down towards Hell Corner, trying to follow through. You can see there Wilson Gige makes contact with Alex Medrano. It is a whole swarm of steel down through turn 1. Now on the run uphill, Medrano has got the run on Cyril, but Cyril's covering him off. He's been T-packed in by Mustangs at his front, side and rear. What can the Mercedes hope to do here to fight against the likes of Wilson Gige? He's up the inside on the 23, heading down through Griffin's Bend for the first time. It does force the 23 a little out wide. That does allow Andre Damrat an opportunity to slip into third place. We head up through the cuttings. It's Cyril from Medrano, Gige and Damrat. An incredibly close top 4, but let's get a look out back here. We see all manner of thing kick off in the midfield here. Watching, this is Chris Grad towards the back of the top 10, I believe. He's down in 11th there, and this 78 car just behind Freno Radic. Then up the road, you can see is Ben Rook already making moves on this race. A few drivers making contact right off the bat there, among them Radic with the Wall of Death between Solman and McPhillamy Park. Down through Skyline for the first time here. It's make or break for a lot of teams down through this section of the track. It's very, very easy, and we've seen it on several such occasions that people's races can come to a complete stop down in this area of the track. And fingers crossed, by looks of it, everyone's through there with very little difficulty. Watching here with Freno Radic, we'll have to catch on with him in a moment's time, as we are seeing here from the point of view of Fabio Farr. He's already looking to challenge Alberto Aragonese's 4th position on the run down the Conrad Straight. So this is all in that fight for 6th place right now. BMW versus Porsche, and Porsche have picked a bit of a rigged fight here. BMW has them pitched for straight line speed. One thing they fail to consider is stopping power, and that the Porsche absolutely has. And furthermore, with Tadeusz Lichka in the fray, through goes Fabio Farr, and following in his wake, there's Carlos Dietz. There was contact in the background. It is Bedlam in Bathurst. Down towards turn 23. The 96 into the top 5. Very closely followed by the Aston Martin. Down towards turn 1. Bear in mind, it's Three's company for the last of that top 5 fight. Let's see if we can get a view on board the man in the middle of it all. That being Carlos Dietz. Just quickly, though, taking a look here, side-by-side action. Lee Hemming up the inside on Chris Farish. Down towards turn 1 at Hell Corner. Trying to follow nearly 3 abreast was Ellison Williams in the background as well. Any which way you look at it, it is steel everywhere here. Down towards turn 2, watching with Carlos Dietz in the background, we can see Martijn van Manen sizing his chances on Freno Radic for 9th place on the grid. Barely millimeters between themselves and the walls here, making their way up toward the cuttings now in a quarry. Dietz has Rook for company, more so considering his chances to defend for 6th place as Fabio Farr continues to open the gaps up here through turn 5 and 6. In towards Solman we go then, out of Frog Hollow into Solman Park, past the Wall of Death. Neither of them making contact with it, down towards McPhillamy. And now with a little bit of aero wash on the nose, what can these lot do? On full whack, down through Brock Skyline, and it's nice, silky and smooth for all 3 drivers. Down through into the S's, following closely on their trail, Chris Grad with Blaze Motorsport. Let's look at the background here to see what else is going on this grid. You can see this is James Mason's point of view. Up in front of him is his teammate Jan Bettentrup. Out back is Neil Wagstaff and Joachim Eriksson in 18th and 19th place. Looking for where the nearest fights on track are concerned. You'd have to take a look towards the intervals to have anything consistent of an answer. For Carlos Dish, he finds himself stuck in the middle, but up the road, dare I say it, there is a fight for the race lead. Let's get a look on board with these three. Wilson Gige looking to put pressure here on Alex Medrano. Also following in his wake is Andre Damrat. Let's get a look on board here with Fat GT's Wilson Gige. This is in the fight for second place, heading up towards turn 23. Bear in mind, we are no longer than 5 minutes into this race and things are still on absolutely nuclear hot heat here in Bathurst. A moment of respite in terms of natural conditions compared to where we were in round 4. Torrential downpour battering Watkins Glen. We've got nice and sunny conditions here in New South Wales. Damrat closely following from behind Wilson Gige. Both of the Mustangs looking to take a piece out of Medrano. Meanwhile, Toby Cyril has opened the taps up on his number 147 and is away by over 2 seconds to the number 40 Mercedes. Looking out back just to get a quick glimpse at what else is going on the grid. We still keep an eye here for Wilson Gige's fight of second place with Alex Medrano. But looking further down the line, we see Fabio Farr starting to slowly drop back in on Carlos Dish and Ben Rook. Chris Grad not far away from them at all. Freno Radic in 9th and Martijn van Manen of VXS into the top 10. Out back behind him there after an incident at the chase is Tadeusz Lichka of Velocity Racing. He's in 11th. Rob Appleton right behind him and in hot pursuit. That makes 2 BMWs there. As caught up in Lichka's incident from earlier on is a rampaging 194. That is Alberto Aragoneses of SRC Motorsports. Vermack in pursuit there as well. Tyler Vermack of the Velocity Racing team. Nicholas Stahl behind him. Jan Bettentrup, Neil Wagstaff and James Mason. Now Mason having lost a position out to Wagstaff there in the number 413. We saw him earlier on today competing in the M4 GT4 over on the Carousel Cup, which he was still able to take to a podium. Looking up the lines here, I think we're about to see something very, very exciting as Medrano has seemingly dropped down the order here. He's had to resort back to the pit lane, and so too has been the case nearly for the 787, but something has gone catastrophically awry for Alex Medrano. What it has given is Wilson Gige executive command of the front row, not if Andre Damrat has anything to say about it. Still looking to pick up on where we left off. What exactly happened? The mysterious case of Alex Medrano and Mercedes. He's now dropped all the way down to 27th as he was forced to retire to the pit lane, has come right back out, but with that lap down deficit, he's plumb last after just under 7 minutes of racing. Truly a bizarre tale. Watching here though, Wilson Gige now defending for second, let alone attacking, as looking up the inside, looks to be the 789 and the 787 by looks of it there. That being, if I'm not mistaken, Chris Farish is out of round 5. Calling retirement there at the chase down at turns 21 and 22. So that is not great news for the exclusive esports team where they are down one driver. They could be up onto the front row here. Not if they have any kind of competition out of Wilson Gige. The single bulwark against them and a front row position at this time as Toby Cyril continues to open the taps, now up nearly 5 seconds over the nearest car. Down through Skyline, it's 2 Mustangs against another. As we can see, starting to close the distance in. In the background, it's definitely a bit of an erroneous sight here. Fabio Farr with Porsche looking to put 6 cylinders against 8. And not far behind him, you've got another set of 8 cylinders, this time out of Aston Martin's Carlos Dish with 5-star esports into that top 5. And then just hanging out back of him there, that's 10 cylinders, 5.2 litre V10. Hanging out the back of the number 14, that's Ben Rook. See here, Damrat's got the run on Gige, looking around the outside, tucks back in to single file. That difference in line attempting to throw him off of the scent there. Out through the chase. Now, something I want to draw attention to here, especially regarding what happened to Alex Medrano, is take a look at the scope of the nose cone damage on Gige's car. Now, I'm not pointing fingers, but if we were to start talking about an incident, you could definitely say, with those two being in such close proximity to one another, and suddenly the Mercedes is back into the pit lane on an emergency stop, and with now damage on that nose, you know, put 2 and 2 together here. It doesn't take a detective to pick up what I'm putting down. We'll let these stewards investigate that one. Our job right now is to show you what's what. And heading down towards turn 2, what is that we're in that fight for second place. Gige still defending from Andre Damrat, but all of this is seemingly allotting extra time to VXS's Toby Cyril, and moreover is drawing in time towards Fabio Farr, Carlos Dish, and Ben Rook. Out through the cutting, you can see it has now firmly become a 3-car fight up for second place. Charging for that charge of second place is Andre Damrat behind Wilson Gige, who's forced into a very tough defending position so early on in this 2-hour race. 10 minutes covered, and there is very little moment for respite. Even on a track like this, some of its paramount dangers is not only the track itself, but later down the line, as we'll come to see it, is that risk of traffic. Heading down through the S's and the Dipper in towards Forest's Elbow we go. We do see that yellow flags are back out. We're going to see who it's for. It's for the number 92 car in trouble. Let's see if we can catch on board with them at this time. The 92 is the one to have brought the yellow flags out, and they're back into the pit lane. So let's see if we can catch from the pit lane there. It's Jan Bettentrup, who is now another DNF in today's race. We cut away from Wilson Gige's fight to quickly catch on board what's going on here just out behind them. As we see, this is Carlos Dish's point of view, as he's in for a very peculiar fight, as it's in a very rare matchup, 8 cylinders against 10. Lamborghini versus Aston Martin for the last of those top 5s. Meanwhile, hanging out back is another set of Mustangs. Actually, just one Mustang this time around, going up against a Ferrari. That's Chris Grad versus Frano Radic. Euro Titans is, and I'm quoting this here, Croatian sensation in the number 70, not number 78, sorry, the number 98. Number 78 is Chris Grad with Blaze Motorsport, whom of which I do not know if they have an affectionate nickname from their team. You can see the line being towed forth for that fight of second place. They are quickly distancing themselves from any other form of competition. So Carlos Dish has to settle into a rhythm of his very own, because that fight for positions north of 4th place is starting to disappear in the early stages of today's race. Now, strategy can win this back. And moreover, he'll be banking on the notion that these 3 eventually, under the airtight pressure they're creating, will one of them at least crack and then end up creating a larger incident that allots free positions to the cars behind. He's banking on a mistake out of those guys there, heading up through Quarry. Looking around the field here, let's not keep everything inside the conversation of the top 10. We want to know what the rest of the grid is concerned with. And looking here with Daniel Karlborg, he's got ample company, as Matthew Williams, who started from the pit lane, I should remind you, is looking for a charge to 20th place with Fats GT's number 923 car. Now, he's a substitute for this round, and going up against Karlborg, this is going to be a stiff defense here. Is also following as another one of the substitutes, Nico Shaska for Onid Racing, the only other Porsche to have entered for round 5 of the championship besides Fabio Farr. We've seen Shaska on a few occasions here on the coverage of the XCL Pro Series. Let's see, though, what all 3 of these guys can do. BMW, Ford, and Porsche. An unlikely matchup, inline 6 versus V8 versus flat 6, and my goodness, did you see the impact there? That was Lee Hemming into the wall. Get a look at this on the replays here. That was catastrophic. As we see in the bottom right is still the live view of things, but looking in the foreground as we were watching with these 3, Lee Hemming clocks the wall there just past the first part of the S's and then ping-pongs his way into the other side of the wall. Now, very, very common thing to happen here at Bathurst. I believe Chaz Moster back in the 2015 Bathurst 1000 did a very similar thing. Side by side then, Matthew Williams up the road from Daniel Karlborg, now up to 20th. The number 19, whom of which I believe to be Lee Hemming, is back into the pit lane there after that huge, huge ping pong off the wall. We'll catch up with him a little. Yeah, there he is. The number 19 of Lee Hemming. Not the best of sights then for the early parts of this 2-hour race, but that is such the case of Bathurst. It is absolutely brutal. So let's get a look back inside of the scope of things in our fight for second place, because Wilson Gige has been eaten alive by the exclusive esports team. Now down to 4th place, Andre Damrat to 2nd, Fabio Farr to 3rd. Watching here with the 789, he's now formed a pretty sizable gap over his teammate. Bear in mind, with no consideration of a team's championship, the drivers are permitted to do as they please. We'll have to catch up in a moment's time, though. The 41, Stephen Sutton of High Caliber Racing, in trouble. And checking here, it's just out of the cutting. He's been turned around in the 41 McLaren. That's what's brought out the yellow flags down in Sector 1 there. We follow back on board with our fight of second place. Far versus Damrat versus Gige. We also saw another yellow flag. This one for the 1-4. I'm looking at my data here. I believe that says the 148. So I believe that's one of the VXS cars, if my memory's not mistaken. The 148, yeah, that is, looking at it here, Martijn van Manen of VXS. Also seemingly caught up with some troubles there appears to be Rob Appleton, who's now down to 11th, but maybe that was just a single position drop. It's definitely nowhere near what's happened for Martijn van Manen. Minor damage, all things considered, but he is down a far, far distance of where he'd like to be in today's race. Back on board with the fight of second place, Damrat v Far v Gige. Now, all of this is still playing into Gige's hands because as far as he's concerned, the two drivers he needs to outscore at this time, and if we bring back up the championship standings, the only two drivers he needs to start outscoring routinely for Mack and Lichka right now, because Sievert's in 4th, and Gige, if I'm not mistaken here, has dropped back a bit of a distance. Actually, no, hang on, wait, hang on a second. Yes, Gige. Why would Gige need to outscore Gige? Yeah, fantastic. Well done, numpty. This is what happens when you broadcast for too long, gents and ladies. So, Gige only really needs to outscore Lichka and Vermaak. That's the point we're trying to illustrate. Oh, that's a new one. That is really a new one. So, being outscored by Far, being outscored by Damrat, being outscored by Cyril, not the end of the world. Really not the end of the world. And with 5 more rounds to follow, plenty of opportunities to score more points. Right now, he's doing everything he needs to. There's not the airtight pressure there was backing... So this is news here from Claudia. Damrat is subbing for Sievert. Now, I'm curious, since, of course, you are part of the event production, so it's good to get a word out of race control themselves. What are the rules surrounding that? Is Damrat going to contribute points to Sievert? Or is it a case where the drivers are accounted for individually? Or are the championship standings that we cover, as per the data submitted, actually for the cars more so than the drivers in them? So yes, Damrat will contribute to Sievert. That adds an extra layer there. So this isn't great news, conversely now, for Wilson Gige. Because Sievert will start gaining an advantage here. In terms of the two drivers he needs to outscore, they're on the podium with him, that being Vermaak and Lichka. He's perfectly fine. There is very little threat there. His new threat comes from this one. The 789 of Andre Damrat subbing for Tobias Sievert. That is going to be his primary threat today. So being back in front of that Mustang in the next hour and 43 minutes is modus operandi for Wilson Gige. Looking out past the rest of the grid here to see where our nearest fights are coming from. Matthew Copsey's looking to get a handful here on Joachim Eriksson for the fight of 15th place. That could be one to watch. Taking a look around the field. You see here, High Caliber Racing versus Frantic. Down through turn 1 they go. So to explain some points that have been relayed to us in regards to some of the regulations in reserves, we also have some other regs to introduce here. Oh my goodness, nearly into the wall. Actually, yes, with a slight hit to the wall there. Matthew Copsey in a spot of bother. Nicholas Dahl looks to go around the outside through Quarry. Could he solidify that move? No, has to back out just before we hit turn 5. Otherwise, both of them would have been in at those BP Ultimate signs at quite some speed. What it does invite, though, Matthew Williams into the sort of playing field here for the fight of what used to be 15th place. Joachim Eriksson has made very clear that that position is now his to play for. Matthew Copsey is in a little bit of trouble. So, to address the point we were making about the regulations, so we've been told here each driver has, each driver slash car have one set of reserve drivers who can reserve for a maximum of 3 rounds. So that's how there's always someone there to drive the car on race day. No one loses in this situation when you have a backline, and these two drivers will ultimately be the ones to take that championship win. We also have to introduce this, as this was relayed between races, after the relatively high death count, death toll, I should say, out of Watkins Glen around 4. The folks at XCL have announced, and this is according to their announcements, that they would introduce a drop round. Now, we've seen drop rounds introduced across a myriad of championships to great success. What does it mean? It's a cumulative process that removes the worst result off of any one driver's contributions to the championships. Say if you have a brilliant season, you're routinely in the top 10, but you have one bad race, and now you're 15th for the end of that set of points just doesn't get included, as along with everyone else's worst results. Like, it's scanned every single race. It's a cumulative process. What it does is it helps fight the odds. We've seen a lot of races go sour for reasons drivers can't explain, like disconnects, hardware failures, anything of the sort, server failures as well, as we've not been, spared of a lot of the problems to have surrounded ACC in the last couple of weeks. Oh my goodness. And there you can see was an issue very much in the game. Fabio Farr with a sizable tank slapper gives over position to Wilson Gige. Get a look at this on the replay. This is out through McPhillamy. Catch the tiniest grain of gravel and grass, moreover, on that rear right. And he did properly slam that wall. Looking back on that, you can see that he's not lost too much ground, but in the straight line game, Porsche is a manufacturer that seldom wins. So going up against Ford, it's a losing gambit. He'll be clinging to the margins in hopes he can be within the braking zones here to have a go. But, oh, looking over the curbs, that was giant for the 96. Get a look at that. We come out of the replays, and it can only come from bad to worse for Fabio Farr. That was all 4 wheels off the ground. I knew one of these days he would catch someone. It was only the 2 rears, but still. Oh my goodness. Huge leap. It was going to catch someone one of these days. Fabio Farr has had an absolute nightmare. Looking at where it stands him right now, he's out past Chris Grad. It puts Carlos Deesh to 4th. Ben Rook is right behind him, by the way. For what was previously the fight of 5th is now the fight of 4th. For Wilson Gige, it minimalizes the gap between himself and Andre Damrat, who is subbing right now for Tobias Siebert. So he's already back onto the margins to outscore the greater majority of his current adversaries. Siebert is further down off of the podium, so is less of a high priority target. But of course, Gige wants to be back on that front row. He wants to be back in charge of this all, but he has got a long road to travel on. First to get to Damrat, next to get to Cyril, because let's just address the elephant in the room here. Toby Cyril, what on earth has gone on? He has had his Weetabix this morning, because that man is on fire here in Bathurst. An unbelievable start, an unbelievable qualifying. BXS are looking at an absolute blinder. Ben Rook still in pursuit. Let's see if we can get on board with the Lamborghini here. And it's rare we get the opportunity, as we do see more trouble. Yellow flags are back out. It's the 148. So it's Martijn van Manen again down this time between turns 2, 3, and 4. Van Manen in further troubles in the 148. Let's see if we can go and get on board, though, with that fight for 4th place, seeing who we can get first among the fray of it. And there is Ben Rook, tucked in behind the Aston Martin of Carlos Deesh. 5.2 litre naturally aspirated Audi/Lamborghini V10 engine up against Aston Martin's co-engineered AMG M177 4-litre twin-turbo V8. The export model given to them by Mercedes-AMG. Of course, one of the major investors for the Aston Martin Lagonda Group has been Daimler, parent company of Mercedes, so they've got to have all of the creature comforts out of most recent Mercedes models, including the beating heart of Mercedes-AMG in that V8 Vantage. Considering where they were last time, their last engine was a licensed built unit, the AM06, that was given to them by Jaguar back in 1998. Well, the engine itself was made in 1998. It was given to them in 2006. For the V8 Vantage. As for Lamborghini, though, this is primarily Audi's work here. Lamborghini has had their hand in the production of this engine. They've been one of the sole reasons that engine has existed for as long as it has, and now even Lamborghini themselves don't recognize it, because with the age of the Huracan swiftly at an end, the move towards the Temerario sees Lamborghini prioritize development of a V8 unit in-house. So gone are the days of this collaboration with Audi. And here's a bit of a bittersweet feeling thinking about it, because it is, of course, the twilight chapter for that Huracan. Last season just gone in most of the championships it competed in. Now, as we see in the IMSA Sports Car Championship, the Temerario is here to stay. The Huracan's days are swiftly numbered. I think this had to have been what it felt like for fans of the Gallardo back in the day. Seeing the Huracan make its way in, we lost that 5-litre early doors. That was a fantastic V10 engine back in its time. But enough on the nostalgia. We are still in this fight for fourth. And even though we've had a moment's respite to think about Lamborghini, we must think about fourth place. 0.4 of a second, the dividing factor in through the chase. And with Grad in pursuit, it could be a three-way fight for fourth in the near future. As we head towards the first half hour of racing covered, we're on board here with Carlos Disch, now off from the attacking to the defending point of view. 5-Star Esports finding some real favour in today's race, as they are not too far off. Let's just give credence to this. It is not too far off being on the podium himself. It's 2.4 seconds between himself and Wilson Gige, who you can see is not finding the time he needs to get to Andre Damrat's point of view. He's nearly 4 seconds out from the 789 up in second place, who himself is 6 seconds out. You see in the background here, Ben Rook has fallen victim because Chris Grad leaps up the inside through turn 2. Later on the brakes goes the Lamborghini, so he'll hold on for the inside of the run in towards the cuttings here. This could get dicey, a little bit of door dinging between the pair. Ford versus Lamborghini in towards the cuttings there. A moment of contact between Rook and Grad. And this is all fantastic news, by the way, for Fabio Farr. You can see he's on the revenge drive. The 96 from 7th place is reeling in Grad and Rook for a chance at a top 5. Staying on board with Simplay Racing's Ben Rook. He's been on a man on a mission in today's race. And in the championship as well. 5th in the championship now. The only Lamborghini in that top 10. So let's get a look around the field here. We'll stay on board with Ben Rook, but after nearly 30 minutes of racing, we see into the pits as well goes Freno Radic. More on that in a moment's time. Apologies for the interruption. They're back onto the discussion right now of where the event standings are. We saw into the pit lane a moment ago was Freno Radic for Euro Titans. He now comprises one of 3 drivers to have taken a mandatory pit stop alongside Martijn van Manen and Matthew Copsey of VXS Motorsports and High Caliber Racing. We stay on board with Ben Rook here, who's still fighting for a top 5 position on this field here at round 5 of the championship. And now we take a look at where things stand overall after nearly half an hour of racing. Toby Cyril leads the charge by 6.3 seconds. It's a near 4-second gap between Andre Damrat in second place with the fastest time for exclusive against Wilson Gige with Fatch GT, the current championship lead. Carlos Disch in 4th place for Aston Martin 5-Star Esports, the number 54, up in a 4th place and 2 seconds up the road right now. This fight for 5th place between Ben Rook and Chris Grad. Simplay Racing and Blaze Motorsports head-to-head here down through the cuttings and up towards Quarry, and close behind them in 7th place, that's Fabio Farr in the number 96 Exclusive Esports Porsche. He's currently in 7th and 5.9 seconds of the last interval up the road from Tadeusz Lichka in 8th place. Alberto Aragoneses in 9th with Rob Appleton in 10th. Vermack in 11th, Wagstaff 12th, Mason 13th and Matthew Williams in 14th. Joachim Eriksson rounds out the top 15. Nicholas Dahl in 16th, Nico Shaska 17th, Daniel Karlborg in 18th, Ellison Williams 19th and Stephen Sutton rounds out the top 20. Radic in 21st, Van Manen 22nd and Copsey 23rd. We're down 4 cars here in Bathurst and we're not even half an hour in. If you thought Watkins Glen was a slaughterhouse, think again. You haven't seen the half of it here. Nearly 30 minutes and we're down 4 vehicles. This is a grim sign here in Bathurst. Now to focus on this for just a moment here whilst Ben Rook escapes the possibility of being intercepted for 5th. Chris Grad is next on the victim list here for Fabio Farr. He's waited long enough for the approach to get back into the charge for a top 5. His first obstacle in the way of things is Grad in that number 78 Blaze Motorsports Ford. We'll be keeping an eye on these three as things progress. We see out back a fight for 8th place. Tadeusz Lichka in the 996 Velocity Racing Mustang up against Alberto Aragoneses in the 194 SRC Motorsports BMW. These two have a great possibility to go head-to-head here. We've seen Aragoneses already operating at peak efficiency in his time with Mercedes over in the Carousel Cup. You could definitely say in comparison to what we're seeing today, that was a little bit more of a sparring session for the Spaniard. The 194 is in hot pursuit. Just quickly getting a look up the road, you can see straight line speed has been the dividing factor for Chris Grad, and where he's getting intercepted in areas of high braking and high maneuverability demands by that Porsche, he is making up for it with absolute straight line grunt. Keep an eye on this one here, as having intercepted traffic is Wilson Gige, and I believe that to be right behind him, that is Freno Radic in the 98 Euro Titans Ferrari. So we are starting to run in to what has been a pressing factor in today's racing fears, and that has been the fear of traffic. This could play a huge hand in the successes or failures of drivers and teams alike today. Of course, whilst there's no official teams championship, so I'm told from the data that I'm given on these broadcasts, there is still the team element involved. A lot of these teams will be communicating quite closely from driver to driver, making sure the team itself operates at peak efficiency. Some serious big label names in the console sim racing space competing in this championship. It is a real opportunity to flex one's muscles. It's a real war game situation here. The drivers, the individual pieces in this larger puzzle. As we see here, looks to be a fight coming up for 6th. Fabio Farr against Chris Grad. Now, Porsche makes up for one thing and one thing only, and it's stopping power. Down into the chase. You saw just how much later on the brakes the 96 could call it over the 78 Mustang. And this is going to be the serious upper hand that Porsche has. If it can stay close enough to the Mustang, it doesn't matter if it loses maybe a 10th or 2 down the back straights or the opening straights. It really does not matter at all, because if it's a heavy braking zone coming up, they can absolutely send it from nearly 2, maybe 3 tenths back at its farthest. We are seeing, though, being intercepted. Looks to be Ben Rook once again. Out back, you can see the fight between Lichka and Aragoneses. They head on to the mountain straight. From behind them, we see that appears to be Rob Appleton being intercepted by Tyler Vermack. So there is that fight going on for 10th place at the moment. Carlos Dees escaping with 4th place, now nearly 2 seconds up the road from 5th. So we see here Rob Appleton versus Tyler Vermack. We're seeing that Vermack, like Fabio Farr, is no stranger to what success looks like here in Bathurst. But unlike Fabio Farr right now, he's not in the same Porsche that he took to the top step of the podium. He finds himself with Velocity Racing's dispensary of McLarens. The number 998 currently chasing Rob Appleton on our screens at the moment, competing for one of several drivers of the Onid Racing lineup. Making his way down to McPhillamy Park here. Onid looking for some solid results in today's race, and they're about to get one more, because that is Alberto Aragoneses, who's gone off the track there after McPhillamy Park just before Skyline Hill. Fortunately to have come out of it with minimal damages, but a lot of gravel in those Pirellis. That's a free position for Appleton and Vermack, now up to 9th and 10th. So this has upgraded itself out of the fight of 10th, now for the fight of 9th. With 0.6 of a second now, that becomes 0.7 just out of turn 19. Rob Appleton has got the upper hand here over Tyler Vermack. We already know this a little too well. BMW and Ford, supreme commanders of straight line speed on the Conrod straight. McLaren, they're no slouches on a good day, but in Bathurst, it's very rarely a good day for straight line speed. out of that 720S. Just too short a distance to get the most out of it. It's going to be cornering capacity, whether Mac has any kind of advantage on the BMW up in front of him. And with Rob Appleton continuing to defend for 9th place, the gap has only come down when the cars start turning, and it comes from 4 tenths to nearly 1 tenth. We see out in the background as well, the 194 of Alberto Aragonese's in even more trouble out through the chase. Now drops behind James Mason in the 413 5-star Esports BMW. And actually looks to have dropped even further back behind Matthew Williams in the 923 Fats GT Mustang. We watch here, though, Rob Appleton could be taken for a ride in towards turn 2 by Tyler Vermack, trying to go later on the brakes, then up the inside, goes Vermack on Appleton. Around the outside, he'll have to keep things. And that was silky smooth out of Tyler Vermack, but what is the fighting chances here for Rob Appleton? We'll stay on board with the 991. We go up through the cuttings here. In front of him is now Tyler Vermack in 9th place. And now, this is the MO for Rob Appleton. He's got to stay with Vermack by the time he gets to the Conrad. He knows that his main advantage in that BMW is straight line speed. Cornering, he can't hope to match off of that McLaren. They are very unstable. They make up for that because if they can be tamed, and it's a big, big challenge on if they can be tamed, they flow around this track like mercury. You can see just how quickly the gap has opened up. It's 1.7 seconds before we've even got to Forest's elbow. It is an alien difference between the Beamer and the McLaren. It is any wonder how the Ford has been able to dominate this long. Could today be the day that that changes? Well, with an hour and 25 minutes, we still have what is normally a whole race ahead of us here. We've barely scratched the surface of what to expect here in the Land Down Under. Looking out back, we see here, this is James Mason fighting with Matthew Williams. And to give more update for what's gone on for the 194 of Alberto Aragonese's, I believe he's dropped even further back. He could actually, as a matter of fact, be out of this race. As yes, the 194 is into the pit lane, down to 20th. That's set to drop even further behind Radic, Van Manen and Copsey by way that it stands at the moment. And oh, actually, Copsey, I believe, might have just disconnected. Oh, that's not good. That is not good. So looking at where things stand then, hour and 24 minutes and 30 seconds left to go. Andre Damrat second with the fastest lap. Toby Cyril continues to lead, and he has gone unopposed all 17 laps of this race in round 5. That 147 is a long, long way away from the nearest forms of competition, but don't let complacency weigh you down, because that 789, I should say, is not far away after one slip on the track. And we saw it was a bit of a bumpy run out of McPhillamy in towards the Skyline Hill run. Keeping things nice and calm, nice and stable. This is a problem we see sometimes in longer form races out of drivers, is letting themselves become bogged down with complacency. This almost ritualized structure of sticking to a basic pattern, so easy to replicate it becomes unconscious, means you leave yourself open for when the situations and stimuli around you change suddenly. And that will be the case for the tires on this car. And on a track that requires constant attention to the way the car is handling corner for corner, one slight deviation away from total 100% focus is the main result of what happens to drivers when they make a mistake on this track. Matthew Copsey in chat saying, I lost a lap and a half hitting the wall at Skyline. I don't have the motivation to run that for another 90 minutes. So it wasn't a disconnect, it was a DNF for the 97. I'm sorry to hear that. Right now, it's a Ford 123, VXS exclusive, and Fats GT. 3 very, very familiar names then for the top rung of positions and times in this championship. And speaking of Fords, into the pit lane at the moment is Chris Grad in the 78 Blaze Motorsports car. Now, in terms of strategy, we don't know a great deal on what the 2-hour races could entail. I think the safest of options, were we to be the ones on track, would be a direct 50-50, an hour on, and then into the pits, and then another hour on again before the checkered flag. Now, drivers, of course, like to experiment, and we've... what was that? I was trying to experiment... Did I try and throw an N in there? Experiment. like that. Experiments. They like to experiment, and they get that 60-40 sometimes. They go for the longer stint, then onto the shorter stint after their pit stop. What we're seeing here is a 40-60 out of Chris Grant. It's a shorter first stint to give himself the breathing room once he comes into the pits, doing it earlier than everyone else. It's this longer undercut that he wants to achieve. And if he plays his cards right, and we've seen this at Bathurst to happen before, when drivers do experiment with their stints and with their mandatory pit stop timings, it can work really, really nicely. One such example in a much shorter race than the one we have today is one such example I can bring up, and that was back in Valencia for the double sprint rounds for the NLRL Sunday League. Christian LeBay took a very early dive into the pits. As a matter of fact, a very extreme strategy, as we see that up the inside over Daniel Carlborg goes Chris Grant. I believe that to be Carlborg at least. Yes, it is, the 593. And back onto my point, he took a very early leap to the pits. That ultimately rewarded him as he did what was effectively a almost 2080. Knowing that he could do the full distance in one go, fuel was never the concern. It was just making his way to the pits as there was no capped fueling time. So doing these early stints can reward you because it gives you open room to play with. And on a track where traffic becomes aloof after a certain amount of time, this is an absolute must. So keep an eye on Grad, as we'll be doing the same. That could be a very curious strategy to follow in the next hour and 20 minutes. On board to what's going on inside the top 5. Carlos Dish to 4th, Ben Rook in 5th. One of the nearest fights on track at the moment. You can see hanging around amidst it all is the number 98 there of Freno Radic. You're seeing here for the Lamborghini, it's struggling a little bit for rotation. I've noticed there. It's sort of dragging itself through some of these corners, and that's where it's losing time out over the Aston Martin. Now up through McPhillamy, heading down towards Skyline Hill. You'd think in theory this is where the Lamborghini can claw in a lot more time over the more nose-heavy Astons, and that definitely does appear to be the case here for Ben Rook. Let's see if we can get some onboards with these drivers at this time. Actually just draw attention to this. The gap between Andre Damrat and Wilson Gige is down beneath 6 seconds. Now, it's a very slow procession. We're talking here to a chance of a second place fight. If Toby Cyril is to go on and win this race, it is really no skin off the teeth for Wilson Gige. His priority right now is making sure as many of the remaining top 5 drivers stay behind him, and that gap continues to be lively. Cyril sneaking his way in is not going to do as much damage as giving Sievert additional points. Let's get on board, though, with that fight going on in the top 5, because I think we are missing out on some action here. Fabio Farr held up behind Freno Radic in his efforts to get around the 98 to get towards the 14 and the 54 that are getting much, much closer to their chances as it stands for a fight of 4th place. We're on with Ben Rook now in the fight of 4th. Oh, sizable hit with the wall there for Ben Rook. It was one tiny, tiny moment of upset in the balance on that Lamborghini. Let's get a look at that on the replay just quickly. This was coming out of the cuttings, and there, that tiny little stab created a much larger problem when he's tank slappered the wall on the left-hand side. In the long run, it is going to be doing some damage on the aero. You do have to forgive us for the sort of sliding effect of the cars. It happens when we come out of the replays. A little bit of desync. That will sort itself out in the next couple of seconds. We're back to normal there, as you see on the exit of Forest's Elbow. The fun side effect of it is it looks like everyone's drifting for a little bit. Out through Forest, then, you can see the gap now having dropped down actually well away from a chance to being in a fight at the top 4. Now this is a defensive fight for 5th place. He's dropped away of his chances to attack Carlos Diaz for position. Now he has to start thinking on how does he himself not get attacked by Fabio Farr. With 0.4 of a second between himself and the Porsche, he is in a dangerous spot here. The matchup between Porsche and Lamborghini is much more evenly laid than the matchup between Porsche and Ford, or Porsche and Aston Martin for that matter. Because straight line speed is another problem for Lamborghini. Now, it's not anywhere to the same extreme extent as other manufacturers on the field. We see into the pit lane as well went Steven Sutton with high caliber racing in the 41 McLaren. He's into the pit lane as we speak. Watching with these two, though, we can see Benrook having a little bit of upset there on the exit. He just allows that 96 to glide on by. Fabio Farr got the better run out of turn 1. So it doesn't necessarily matter where the Lamborghini puts itself now. The Porsche can and will outbrake him. So a sad state of affairs here for Benrook. He drops out of that top 5 for the time being, but there is still a lot more to play for, so all is not yet lost for Lamborghini, but it could be the considerations now for Rook and for Simplay Racing, as this is their proverbial ace in the hole for round 5, is to get him in earlier than the rest of the field for that top 5 into an early pit stop and capitalize in the second stint for an undercut strat. That could be the call here. Now, we're not sure what their call is. If we were to be making it for them, now would be the time. Usually the earliest signs of flagging is only going to snowball into greater issues for the drivers. Now, of course, it's been a long time since we ourselves ever drove around Bathurst, but in the time that we did, we had a very similar structure to adhere to. And how I'd play it, now, admittedly, take my word with a huge grain of salt, but it would be that the earliest signs of fatigue on the tyres, give it maybe 1 lap over, then pit. We'll see whether or not that's something that the Lamborghini chooses to adhere to, or if it'll be a little bit more of a hesitant run-in to potentially maximize the chances of an undercut. That is a lot to consider on this track as well. And the beauty of Bathurst as such a chaotic venue is that a lot of these strategies, experimental or otherwise, can work rather well, because there's the one factor that a lot of strategies fail to account for: driver error. And it can happen in front or behind and snowball into an issue later on with excessive traffic. It can all catch up the drivers up in front. If they get caught up whilst you're on open road and you're making the time up, their stint drops away massively. So it is a big gambling game. A lot of these drivers play for strategy, and we see here for Benrook, he stays out coming into lap 22. .149 still in the pit lane. That's Ellison Williams most recently. We watch here, this is Tadeusz Lichka heading out through turn 1. He's a distance here from Benrook, 11.6 seconds there with Tyler Vermack, since having passed up Rob Appleton in pursuits now of his teammate at the Velocity Racing team. This is for 7th place. The gap 6.6 seconds. That could be one to watch in the near future. Monitoring the gap between the two Fords at the back of the podium, Andre Damrat subbing in for Tobias Sievert at the exclusive esports team's number 789 car, finds himself equally matched in a rough 6.2 second gap right now between himself and Fats GT's Wilson Gige. Now, that gap has stayed that way for quite some time. I think it's been ever since the Mercedes sort of dropped away from that fight, that being Alex Medrano. I'll have to catch up with that in a moment's time. We'll take a look for some of the other fights going out on track here. We do see very close to one another is James Mason and one other driver. So we do want to see who that is. As it stands, that's Ellison Williams. So not a fight for position, just space on the track physically itself. We did see into the pit lane now. I did see a fleck of yellow. What was that? It was the 98. It's Freno Radic. Oh dear, that looks like trouble for Radic with Euro Titans. That could be another DNF today. That could bring the toll of cars down towards, yes, that's going to be down yet another number to 21 cars on the grid. We started with 27. We're down 6 cars in under an hour. See here with Carlos Diaz, he's 1.3 now, slicing down a 1.2 second margin between himself and Fabio Farr in the 96 Porsche. Now, the last lap yielded a 4/10 improvement over the time of the number 54 for the number 96. So Fabio Farr has some positive gain here. He's looking to close ground on the Aston Martin. With Benrook hanging out back for 6th place, Carlos Disch is next in the iron sights for Fabio Farr. It was actually ever since the Porsche dropped away that those two Fords have stayed in such equal stead of one another. So that would be one to keep an eye on here. We also have another one out back. This is for 13th place, Joachim Eriksson versus his teammate Nicholas Dahl. This is for 13th place on the field, the 333 versus the 987. Now, definitely a lesser extent when it comes to intensity, as these are, of course, two teammates. They want to help each other out, but it's going to be the case if push comes to shove. One driver is evidently faster than the other. They'll have to make that decision among themselves, as I don't necessarily think team orders will play too heavy a hand at this current stage for them. These are two rivaling teams, as it were. Back in the day when it used to be known as the K1 Esports team, 5-Star had a vehement rivalry with Exclusive back in the times of the, I believe it was the GHR XEC. That was a very stern rivalry, and it was a one of three in all of that when you also include the former AERT, the All Elite Racing team that was also part of that active fight for the championship way back when. That was well over a year and a half ago now. Now these are new drivers on new stages and new states of affairs. Heading in towards the chase then. It's Disch v Farr, Aston Martin versus Porsche. Down towards the chase we go, the 54 versus the 96. Let's stay on board then for what is the fight of fourth. So you see peering over the rear wing of that Aston Martin, you can see the Porsche hanging low, very close to the rear bumper on the exit of turn 1. On the run uphill, he'll be sucked into the slipstream generated by the Aston, knowing that the Aston does have ever so slightly more straight line speed over the Porsche. It'll be braking factor once again that gives Fabio Farr the upper hand in the straightaways. It's something very fascinating to study when it comes to the Porsche. We saw it a little bit back in the 4 hours of Bathurst, though it was less of a primary consideration for their success overall. But just study the way that Fabio Farr drives that Porsche. It's eerily reminiscent, dare I say it, of... ooh, yeah, that's from the wall down at the quarry there. A bit of a touch for Farr in the 96 just earlier on. But yeah, just to follow the way that he drives the car, it's very reminiscent. And this is a bit of a far shot, level with me for a second, but it's very similar to the way I've seen people drive cup cars, because he knows for a fact straight line speed is very little of a chance of what's going to give him the upper hand on other drivers, so he has to fling the car hell for leather through the corners. He's maximizing that velocity through the corner, as much momentum as the car can physically carry before the back end swings. And this is giving him the run that he needs right now. He's in the slipstream, and where the gap looks to possibly stay about 2 tenths, it could actually draw to 1/10 of a second. But where he'll be looking to strike now is where the Aston Martin hesitates to step. Out through turn 20, into 21 and 22, looking for the later braking, but it's just a little too far away. Doesn't want to throw Disch off the scent here, doesn't want to catch him by surprise, because in an area as tight as that, it is incredibly risky. Moreover, the Aston and the Porsche aren't the most petite of GT3s. They are very wide over the rear axle, and it makes them very hard to go side by side with, especially in the tighter areas of the track. His next opportunity could be coming up down at turn 2 as we head in towards turn 1. He did get much later on the brakes, very nearly to the back end of the Aston Martin. As the two go barreling out of turn 1, up the mountain straight we go. Carlos Disch is limited of options of what he can do to defend here against Fabio Farr. All he can really hope to do right now in this area is keep the foot firmly in the bulkhead of the car and pray that he is still ahead by the time he hits turn 2. And prayers have been answered for him there out through Griffins, as now he stays up in 4th place. It's a very close matchup, the kind of matchup that you don't necessarily think about. Now, it's still kind of one-sided in terms of straight line speed. Aston Martin has Porsche beat for that much. As you can see there is still the risk to be considered of the Porsche platform itself. One slip up and you are seeing big problems, less than little problems. The Porsche platform requires way more concentration out of its drivers, and it seems almost perfectly fit there for Fabio Farr, but even excellent drivers make their handful of mistakes, and we saw was a lot of momentum trimmed out when the back end of the car gave way through the cuttings. Now, it wasn't anything too crazy, but when you consider how close these two are performing to the same baseline, the slightest deviation from rank makes a huge difference. Down towards Forest's elbow, and you can see these mistakes are allowing him to play a little bit more aggressively. Now that he has come to understand where the limit of the car sits, he can get a lot closer to that. But this is a very fine line one walks upon, especially in the middle of a race. Neither of these two have taken their pit stops yet. They're still on the same tyres they started on, so their tyres are going to start seeing a little bit more punishment as time goes on. 25 laps in with an hour and 7 minutes left to go. Down towards the chase, you can see he's not going for those late lunges anymore. He's not 100% sure the Porsche can take it. Moreover, he's buying his time here, studying where Deesh is at his weakest and looking for his opportunities to get around him. Porsche drivers, we have to see it, they have to try a lot harder, I've seen, to take positions proper, because they know the immediate fight back is going to be on those straights, especially at a track like Bathurst. We see all these hesitant performances as well out of Porsche on another track over at the Autodromo Nazionale di Monza, where we saw much of the same thing. It's a lot more of a chestnut checkers situation for the Porsche users. And this is all fantastic news for Carlos Deesh, because he's not having to consider anywhere near as much trouble with his Aston Martin. It is the tried and true iron workhorse of GT3 in this game. The easiest to pick up, the hardest to put down. It's an addictive vehicle. Very revered amongst new drivers and also veterans alike. It's a very comfortable platform. Not hard to see where Aston Martin's successes out of this V8 Vantage came from. It is no slouch. It's got the underpinnings of a great power plant under that bonnet. And the balance of the car is really not too bad either. You can see another clock against the wall there, out the wall of death. That was for the 96 of Fabio Farr. And he's dropped now 0.7 of a second away from Carlos Deesh. Has it been the case that the pressure of trying to pass the Aston is starting to get a little bit to Fabio Farr? He's normally, we've seen a driver that doesn't break too easy under the stresses of close front-to-back racing. I suppose after a while, with the amount of corners thrown at you in that middle sector, you do build up almost this mental block, this fatigue of sorts after a certain amount of time, as it all becomes a little bit overwhelming. 23 corners in a span of a track less than a quarter of the size of the Nürburgring Nordschleife is a lot of information. This is a dense track for corners. So as we get towards the halfway mark, we'll be taking a look at the overall standings here. We've been watching for the longest time with Carlos Deesh and Fabio Farr. We'll cut away from them as we see just having emerged from the pit lane. That's Joachim Eriksson with Frantic Motorsport. We were following on board with that fight for fourth for quite some time here. So let's see if there were any other fights that we perhaps missed out on. Taking a look around the field, things have slowed down and in fact swung away from the 23, as now having fallen even further away from Andre Damrat, Wilson Gige might have to start considering his odds at defending his podium spot off of the approaching Carlos Deesh. Predictions at the moment then, M. Williams for top 10, so that's Matthew Williams predicted at a top 10 at the moment. If he stays out of trouble, you can see his nearest target 1.8 seconds clear of him. That's Neil Wagstaff with Onid Racing. Further up the line is Rob Appleton, but into the pits goes Fabio Farr. So the fatigue did start to catch up a bit there to the 96. That's a smart call for the Porsche, looking to near enough match a tit-for-tat 50-50 strategy for stint times. James Mason also in the pit lane at the moment. This gives a free top 10 for Williams. Now comes the question of how can he capitalise on this? Bear in mind that I believe, looking at it here, Williams started from the pit lane in that 923. So you've got to hand it to him here on a grid that started out 27 cars strong in a round 5 of the championship to come up into the top 10 before the halfway mark and still have way far ahead of a road to play for. That is quite impressive. We'll see where strategy takes him though in the next hour and 3 minutes. Neil Wagstaff is his nearest target in sight, and in the time we've been watching these two, he's made half a second on that 993. So for the Onid Racing talent in the number 993 Porsche, he might start having to consider his options in defense just before a potential run to the pit lane as well. The 148 in even more trouble. Yellow flags are out, and that again was, I believe, for Martijn van Manen. Let's see if we can go and find him there. That was the course car, I believe, we were focusing with there. That is Martijn van Manen. That's who brought the yellow flags out. And that could be potentially the end of the road for a VXS car on this grid. Now, we've seen a few occasions where drivers have been forced back into the pit lane here. I'm not sure what's going to go on for the 148 in this race. We see coming out of the pit lane, there's James Mason with the 413 5-star esports BMW. Toby Cyril is in as well. I want to point this one out. In all of the ruckus created a moment ago, Toby Cyril, the race leader, has come into the pit lane. That leaves Andre Damrat out by his lonesome for command of this race, with Wilson Gige up to second. Ben Rook up on the podium for the time being. Carlos Disch is into the pit lane, looking to attempt to at least overcut the strategy set in via Fabio Farr. We'll see, though, exactly how that plays out. Farr's on the exit of Forest's elbow, about to enter the Conrod straight, whilst Carlos Disch is in the pit lane in that 54. Also in the pit lane as well, Tyler Vermack and Rob Appleton. So we're starting to see a lot of drivers, at least in this scenario, are playing things very safe. For Carlos Disch, I think he's done more than enough there over Fabio Farr in the 96. Whilst Farr is down towards the chase, Disch is on his way out. So that is firm and confirmed control of position there for Carlos Disch. He emerges just out in front of Chris Grad. He's not too far away from being in that top 5 fight a little earlier on today. He's definitely played things a lot longer out. He's from 12th place and set to gain quite a few positions when we get the final rung of pit lane runs. Looking around the field then, we still have plenty of drivers still set to pit. Damrat, Gige, Rook, Lichka, Williams and Wagstaff among them. But Toby Cyril, former race leader, now in 7th place, so he won't have a perfect record here. It won't be a grand slam, not that I think he's going to be arguing too profusely with it, given how well his race has gone so far. As we head towards that halfway mark, we're going to wait to see for where all of the pit lane runs are concerned to give us that final verdict before we get any further battles before the checkered flag. Before we do that, let's get a look here. Wagstaff v Cyril. So Toby Cyril has emerged from the pit lane, both arms swinging because he's already back into the fighting spirit, and this is for 6th place over Neil Wagstaff with Onid Racing in that number 993 Ferrari. Straight line speed, just allowing the Ford to just pick up his bags and walk past that Ferrari. But it's got a little bit square shaped for him there, out through the chase. He had to run all the way over. That turns 21 and 22, but it's still going to be the position nonetheless. Dread it, run it. Dread it, run from it. And that still arrives all the same. Halfway into the race then, Toby Cyril is back into position, gaining form. He's up past Gige, he's up past Lichka, now back up onto the podium. That didn't take particularly long there. He's played that very, very nicely. Not a foot wrong so far for Toby Cyril. This has been perfectly executed to a T out of that 147. VXS really ought to pat themselves on the back with this one, because this has been second to none. In what has been definitely a bizarre, almost Wild West when it comes to who could have took home the race lead. And we're still far from the talks of the race win, but it is looking likely for Cyril. Let's say in an ideal world, we do have that. It is going to break the toe of what has been measured control by only 2 teams over the course of the last 2 months of racing here in the Pro Series. Fats GT and Exclusive have dominated, but now a 3rd Ford looks to make an impact. More on that, though, in due course. 59 minutes left to go. Toby Cyril is back to 3rd place. Ben Rook in 2nd at the moment, and I believe leaves Andre Damrat out by his lonesome. But there you can see the race leader no more comes to the pit lane in the 789. It has been a very valiant run for him, subbing in for his teammate Tobias Siebert. Let's see where the cards land when he comes into the pits here. He's 13 seconds, and that gap is quickly dwindling as we try and catch on board with Ben Rook to see what his current verdict of things is. He's staying out. And now this is a surprising one when you consider Lamborghini isn't a manufacturer known on this game best for its tyre conservation. But out of Ben Rook, he has played things very, very dangerously here. He has gambled quite significantly with his own performance. But that Lamborghini, for love nor money, will not enter the pit lane. You've got to hand it to Ben Rook. He leads here with Simplay Racing, but he still has that pit lane to serve. Chris Rook in chat saying that he's very good at saving tyres. Well, evidently, you can see it here. He has really took on what most drivers would consider a bite too large to chew. As in that number 14 Lamborghini, he's really played against it all. That Lamborghini, it wants to die. It's a machine yearning for a swift death on those tyres. Rook says otherwise. This is some mad science then at Simplay Racing, evidently, because how they've been able to squeeze this much performance out of the Huracan, it is nothing short of miracle work from Ben Rook. Looking here, this is Carlos Dish. Down across the line there to 4th place. Now out behind Andre Damrat in a very confident stead of position. His nearest target right now, Chris Grad, is chasing by 1.2 seconds away. Now, this is a much more lopsided matchup than the one we saw between Aston Martin and Porsche. This is not so easily set in stone here. Oh, I will have to catch up with that in a moment's time. Yellow flags are out in that 3rd sector. As we see there in the foreground, just catching with Rob Appleton. That is the course of conversation at the moment. That's the 923 of Matthew Williams, a driver who was previously predicted to be in that top 10, is now 3 positions out, but he could be back up to 12th, potentially 11th here, with 2 drivers in the pit lane in front of him, Nico Shaska, and by looks of it, they're having just left the pit lane. Actually, no, it's not Rob Appleton, sorry, it's Nicholas Dahl, just on his way out of the pit lane as we speak. As there you can see Dahl in the background, but he's going to have to play with nose cone damage seemingly for the rest of this race right now if he wants to gain that chance to be in the top 10 when the checkered flag drops. So according to what we've been told here by Chris Rook in chat, Ben Rook, who's currently behind the wheel of the Lamborghini, I believe still out in front of this race. Yes, still yet to have pitted and has gone now 31 laps strong. This is something we've been told by Chris Rook, and that's that he's done nearly 90 minutes on 1 set of tyres. So he is the witch doctor of Pirellis, this one, so we're told. So for Ben Rook, this could be a real power play decision. Does he choose to try and outlast the rest of the grid, knowing that it's a bit of a toss-up here as to whether or not he's going to be able to find himself on the podium when the checkered flag drops? He is playing for one of the most bizarre and possibly one of the most risky strategies because it requires a lot of foresight to execute. He finds himself currently 32 seconds away from Toby Cyril, regardless of if he pits now or in 25 minutes time. If he can do the hour-and-a-half mark he's claimed at doing, he's still going to be passed for the leading position. So he's not out in for this for a race win. He is still gunning for a podium, and there is every chance right now that he could still do that. The gaps are still rich and rare between that top 3 behind him, as it were, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th, soon to become 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. So there is a chance he can fit himself among the ranks of the podium, but it's going to be tight. It is going to be very, very tight. So he's playing with fire here. Let's see how he fares. 55 minutes left to go. Let's get a look at where the grid stands right now. After our majority run of pit stops, with only 1 left to serve, and that's Ben Rook playing the long game. He leads here in Bathurst for the time being. He's up the road from Toby Cyril in 2nd. Andre Damrat now in 3rd place. Carlos Dish in 4th. Chris Grad in hot pursuit from behind him there. They make their way out of Quarry. He's in 5th with Blaze Motorsports. Tadeusz Lichka in 6th with Tyler Vermack in 7th for a Velocity 6th and 7th. Depending on where things stand, could be a 5th and 6th later down the line. Wilson Gige has something to say about that, though. Believe that to be true. The number 23 with the fastest lap is 8th place and in close pursuit of 7th off of Vermack. This could be one to watch here. We'll stay on board with these two as we look further down the grid. Fabio Farr in 9th place with Rob Appleton in 10th. Nicholas Dahl with Frantic Motorsports in 11th with Neil Wagstaff in 12th. Matthew Williams is into the pit lane servicing damage on his Mustang. He's dropped from 13th. That could lot 3 positions up to Ericsson, Mason and Colborg in 14th, 15th and 16th. We're still watching with Gige v Vermack in the fight of 7th place. And I do want to try and get some onboard cameras between these two just before we get down towards Forest Elbow. And really, I don't believe it, but playing around the outside, that's Wilson Gige up and around Tyler Vermack. It shows that the inside line isn't everything in corner defense, as momentum is a huge consideration in all of that. Wilson Gige had more momentum, flung it around the outside of Forest Elbow. It's a move that Vermack wasn't expecting to defend in. He didn't expect to sort of try to defend from the outside of the corner. More so, he was trying to defend the inside of the corner off of the 23. And that's allowed him to sort of serve him a bit of a blinder here, a bit of a dummy, as it were, out through Forests, and gave him 7th place. But not for, you know, seemingly forever here, as we still see 7/10, 8/10 of a second there as they cross the line, still between Vermack and Gige in that middle sector where maneuverability is a key defining part of success. That McLaren can easily catch back up, and there you can see the earliest of signs being netted over back towards the direction of Tyler Vermack with a bit of a trip there out of turn 1. Wilson Gige seemingly lost a little bit of time, but as you can see, he gains all of it back on the mountain straight. 52 minutes left to go. We watch here with Chris Grad. 1.4 seconds from Carlos Dish in what could be a potential run to the podium. Bear in mind, all of these positions are likely in the set to try and overtake Ben Rook, who I am told now is into the pit lane. So let's see if we can get on board here with the 14 of Ben Rook. Now, the gamble was that he could try and get to the podium here with this risky strategy. Now, he's not going to do the full hour and a half that we know that he's capable of, or so that it's claimed that he's capable of. He's playing things a little bit safer here, and with just over half of the race accustomed for in one stint, he's into the pits. That gives Toby Cyril the race lead back, with Andre Damrat not far from his current position. So right now, at the best of times, it could be third, but he's really going to need to wrap up that pit stop as soon as possible for him here. And with a minimum of 25 seconds on the stop, it's highly, highly unlikely he will emerge on the podium. But pace-wise, it's definitely not out of the bookings for him to fight for it by the end of this race. He's going to be back onto the track with much fresher tyres than the drivers around him. Carlos Dish now onto the podium as Ben Rook is cleared for exit. Bear in mind, Chris Grad has just passed him up there, so that now drops him to 5th place. So you got to hand it there to Ben Rook. It was a serious gamble, but he's still in the top 5. There are not many drivers that one can name that can do all of that and then some with a Lamborghini. That is really quite something. You see here with Carlos Dish currently being followed by Ellison Williams down in 18th place. That's currently the buffer zone between himself and Chris Grad right now. 1.2 seconds away as we make our way to quarry. And all of that aero wash being generated over the nose of the Mustang is actually going to be doing Carlos plenty of favours when he makes his way to Skyline Hill, because he'll have all of the aero on the nose of the Aston Martin, where the Mustang will have significantly less. Now, as it's just tried to get around that of Ellison Williams, and actually that has brought, by looks of it there, a temporary white flag. And we don't know whether or not Williams just got onto the anchors there. Yes, I think it was actually the case, because there doesn't look to be any apparent damages for that Ferrari in the Exeter Forests. Looking for nearby fights. Well, you found one here. Chris Grad could be fighting for 4th place off of Ben Rook in a moment's time. You can see the Lamborghini is gaining on him. This is a seriously lopsided matchup. We talked a lot about matchups here for the Lamborghini because... and we've also talked about it for Porsche, because they are two manufacturers that do often find themselves on the back foot. But in rare such cases, we do find where they have an advantage. And this is definitely going to be one such case. Maneuverability they'll have in tenfold over the Fords, but straight line speed they will critically suffer at. Despite having 2 more cylinders, they still find themselves a touch anemic compared to the Mustang, because they lack the torque generated by that 5.4 litre. They've got a slightly smaller engine with more cylinders. They're making slightly less torque over the Fords. They've just got a little bit more grunt to give over the Lambos. Looking around the field very quickly here to see what's going on. We see another fight going on. This is for 15th. Karlborg v Shaska. The 593 of Frantic Motorsports versus the 992 of Onid Racing. Shaska, of course, has been a long-standing driver for Onid. He was originally a substitute driver, but now for the 992, he stays on with Onid on his way down at the Conrod Straight. From behind him there, you can see that's the race leader, Toby Cyril, for VXS Motorsport. Watch here with Nico Shaska. Makes his way to try and make the run around the outside. He'll be to the inside for the run down into the chase. But despite going later on the brakes, has he had his goose cooked here by Daniel Karlborg? So it may seem, because on the exit of turn 22, he's got the inside line down to turn 23. Does he yield for the arrival of Toby Cyril? No, is the answer right now. Back in a single file, allows the 593 to run himself a little bit wide out through turn 23. And that's a free position for Nico Shaska. And that's compounded by the arrival of that 147. But where the 593 moved over, The 992 is not content to forfeit his place on the track, knowing that Toby Cyril has brought with him another part of this fight, as now being towed up to the back end of the 593. That's the 923 of Matthew Williams. And because of all of that, he's allowed him to get up side by side and out ahead of the BMW. Nico Shaska adamant to not suffer the same fate here, holding on to the back of the top 15. He is going to push this as far out as he can possibly go. He'll be shown the lights by the 147. Toby Cyril wants to get up and around. This is his opportunity up through the cuttings. Nice and discreet there, back into the fight. Something to consider just quickly as well. Close fight here. Fabio Farr versus Tyler Vermaak. Now, this is a very peculiar one when you consider these two are teammates. Now, it may not seem that way because Tyler Vermaak in this championship is competing for velocity as his sort of final season with the team in competition here on the Xbox Community League. But over on the NLRL Console Endurance Series, Tyler Vermaak has already joined the exclusive esports team and was placed in the car with Fabio Farr in Bathurst at the Bathurst 4-hour. Oh my goodness, into the wall. Speaking of, goes Fabio Farr. The back end swings away on that Porsche. Get a look at this on the replay here. We were watching with the two. In towards the cuttings is where this happened. Was it a bit of aero wash? I think so, yes. The back end comes away and it was doing both oversteer and understeer. It was just completely washed out there. I don't know what on earth had gone on for Fabio Farr, but he's dropped now 6 seconds out of line. The 96 actually ran into trouble between Solman and McPhillamy. Dare I say it, have we just skipped there what is a DNF for a serious player in this event? Yes, Fabio Farr is out of round 5. In a shock turn of events, the 96, who has had many a matchup, finds his last against the wall. And that is a serious shockwave for the rest of the grid. Getting a look at how this is going to affect things. It is shoving quite a few drivers now up in extra position. Looking out back, this is great news for Rob Appleton. He's up to 9th place. Nicholas Dahl finds his way to the top 10. Neil Wagstaff is up to 11th. And then looking up into that top 15, Williams has got the top 15 for his very own without really having to do all too much. And it also gives him the chance here to fight for 14th over Nico Shaska with Onid Racing. So the stakes have been raised here, but one thing is for certain, we are down. I'm trying to make sense of this. 9 cars on this race here. We thought maybe Watkins Glen was the height of it. You know, it was really hell on earth. The heavens had slammed shut to let forth biblical amounts of rain onto that track in round 4. But it seems you just give them the devices of Bathurst by itself. And as we mentioned before, this is a track that demands respect, if ever to be conquered at all. And if you take one step wrong out of that, you will find your maker very quickly. See here for Shaska v Williams. This is for 14th place. Another fight to consider still going on. Deesh v Grad. This is for 3rd on the grid. So Carlos Deesh looking at a sizable points boost to get onto the podium in the number 54 5-star esports car. When you consider how things fared for 5-star last time we were at Bathurst for a major event, you'd look back to the 4 hours of Bathurst in the Console Endurance Series, where 5-star suffered a crippling defeat, as it was an absolute slaughter for their lineup in the 4 hours of Bathurst, a result to forget, but today for them could be a result to remember. 43 minutes left to go. We're still watching with Nico Shaska and Matthew Williams, Onid versus Fatch for 14th place, as one of the closest fights on the grid right now. So you see here, Williams looking to try and spook Shaska on his way into turn 2. He was a little worried about that there, as sort of made that fake out move to the inside. He's trying to spook him, he's trying to frighten him, to force him to defend early doors. You can see, though, that Shaska still quite steadfast in his defense of 14th place. He didn't budge through to turn 2. He knew that it was a bluff being served to him by Williams, now up through Quarry. And really, it is quite a shocker. With far out of this race, it leaves Nico Shaska as the last of the Porsche 911s. Now on the exit of McPhillamy Park. In towards Skyline. Oh, running over the exit though. There goes Matthew Williams. He rejoins the track. Fortunately, no harm, no foul there. He did the appropriate move there. That was it was well played for him. It does take a serious reaction time out of these drivers to make that decision so quickly, because if you start steering whilst you're slammed firmly on the brakes in a fit of panic, that is what causes these huge spin out incidents, and we've seen it so many times here in Bathurst to be such the case. We see for Nico Shaska though, could his time be up here? The Ford is up and alongside him now, the inside of the run in towards the chase. There goes Matthew Williams over Nico Shaska to 14th place into turns 21 and 22. A solid defence by Nico Shaska, but in the straight lines, he can't hold a candle to 5.4 litres and 8 cylinders of all-American grit from the Ford Motor Company. Where he can potentially challenge, though, is in towards those braking zones again. I must say this time in and time again. I think the best showcase we ever got for the Porsche's braking capacity was out of Cas van Velzen in Season 3 of the Sunday League over at the Monza round. He really did show off what these cars are all about, and hopefully we could see the same out of Nico Shaska. One of its strongest capacities here is to get stopped on a dime. So every heavy braking zone, you have to take the risk. Otherwise, every car is just going to walk over you. You can see, though, that Shaska is pushing that car to its limit at the moment to stay with the Mustang. Looking around the field, just to quickly point out, there is a fight here going on for 6th place. Tadeusz Lichka versus Wilson Gige. Batch GT versus Velocity. And this has definitely been a bit of a doomsday scenario for Wilson Gige, because originally his hopes were to outscore the majority of the grid to keep that gap lively. The two people that he really needs to keep behind him at the moment is Vermaak and Lichka, and while they are behind him, it is really not by a long way, especially in Lichka's case, because you can see right now it's less than half a second at the previous interval as they make their way to the cuttings. So Gige's doing enough, but he's inviting 5 other drivers to start carving away, and it's going to be a very tight top 5. And he's been able to hold on to one of the thickest margins of points among any two set of drivers in this championship so far. When coming into this round, it was 37 points between himself and Vermaak. I'm not convinced that it's going to be 37 points with him and any other driver to potentially take Vermaak's spot on the charts here. I mean, I'm looking in the direction of Toby Cyril. He's currently in 12th place. We're looking at a sizable leap in points. He's only with 68 points. He's actually in a joint 12th place with Aragoneses and Mason. That's how close the point spread is. You don't see it in the top 10 all too often. Really, that is the case we face here. We also just seen very close fighting here between Grad and Rook, as Ben Rook and Chris Grad make contact. Down at the chase, it's a full 360 for the 1-4 and the 78. And it has all gone horribly wrong, but this is brilliant news for Wilson Gige. He's not going to be arguing with this at all. He can see the Lamborghini, and there goes 5th place. That is horrible news, though, for Ben Rook. Contact with Chris Grad, and he's into the pit lane immediately to service damages. Rook isn't going into the pit lane, so he will get the position. This is fantastic news for both him and Wilson Gige, as seemingly both of them have won. In their own respective fights here, Wilson Gige is up 2-3 positions. Tadeusz Lichka gets to be into the top 5 by looks of things here. And for Ben Rook, he's still in a very solid point scoring position. He's 5th in the championship. The people that he needs to keep outscoring to stay up in the lead of that, or stay in that top 5, I should say, is, I mean, looking at the list here, Milliston, Garrett, Dahl, Warner, Ericsson. There, he's outscoring all of them and then some. In terms of making significant advancements, he's currently behind the rest of the top 5. So for Ben Rook, the worst it can get for him right now is he stays in 5th. So he's comfy. He's in a solid spot there. So as far as I know, to answer the questions by Chris Rook in chat, so what happened for Ben was heading down into, and we caught this pretty late on, but what it looked like, it was a side-by-side fight between Chris Grad of Blaze Racing and Ben Rook of Simplay Racing. They were heading side-by-side down towards the chase, the heavy braking zone down at turns 21 and 22. 20, 21 and 22, I should say. And at the apex of 21, they were still side by side. Both of them ran wide off the track. And then it was a case where they bumped just before they hit the runoff. And as his car rotated, it caught the grass and sent him into a full 360 spin. Where things have ultimately ended up landing, there was more damage seemingly dealt over to Rook's direction than there was to... not to Rook's direction, to Grad's direction than there was to Rook. Speaking of Grad, he has since emerged from the pit lane, now 11th on the field. With Rook in 6th, he's in a comfortable spot. Things aren't going to advance up to a 4th place spot in the championship. The worst place he can expect to be right now is 5th when we head around 6. I suppose when the folks at XCL TV pick things up where we left off here. It's been 2 very exciting rounds, 2 rounds that have significantly shaped the landscape of the championship for the second half coming. But with that fight as well, fizzles out one of the closest fights on track at this time. So we do find ourselves with 36 minutes left to go in a bit of a slump here, as is almost tradition at any race in Bathurst. We do enter this quiet strategic period where a lot of drivers are focusing more on the lap times now than moment-to-moment action, because as is the case when you have this high pressure environment and a lot of things going on, when the reaction starts to dissipate, you do end up with a lot of free space. Drivers separated by distances too far to consider as battles. A lot of it is just drivers trying to get in each other's head, drivers trying to stay in the right kind of headspace. It does become, after a certain amount of time, a bit of a mental battle in these longer races. And with 2 hours, admittedly, it's no endurance race, but it is still a long enough time for these drivers to sort of lock in, as it were. Out through McPhillamy, we're on board with Lichka, with the Velocity Racing team. That 996. He's in good stead here. I mean, coming into this round, 3rd in the championship, he's likely to lose that position out, sadly, though, to Sievert and Damrat, who is currently subbing in for Sievert. Sievert was 4th, off bin by only 2 points in the championship. As a matter of fact, you can take a look at the top of your screens here, knowing we've got about 35 minutes left in this race to look at the championship standings. Rajije, coming into this round, was leading by 37 points, I should say, sorry, with Lichka 3rd, Sievert off him by only 2 points. This is where it closes up behind that 37-point gap. It is paper thin between the rest of our competitors in the championship. Something to point out as well, that Lamborghini, Ben Rook, is getting a little bit closer with every following lap. With 34 minutes left to go, could Lichka potentially be looking at a defensive fight for the last of those top 5 spots? Knowing 6 seconds now opened up between himself and Wilson Gige, the chances for him to take 4th place are starting to wane. But for the former Triple Eight, now the 996, could there be the chances here? Around the field, I mean, it is a case now, it's a lot of drivers just staying in each other's wake here. In terms of close fighting, we saw up the road there, as a matter of fact, was the 987 on the, I want to say that's the 41, so yes, that was a lapped car there. That was Stephen Sutton subbing in for Anthony Valorio at High Caliber Racing. And for Sutton as well, he's been busy. He was in the 570S earlier on today in the Carousel Cup. Now he finds himself in the 720S here in Bathurst for 2 hours of racing in the XCL Pro Series. So there's a lot on the dinner plates for a lot of people in today's race, to name a few. Well, just a fun fact as well, just to point out here, Justin Benton in the number 1. This is the grid car if I'm not mistaken. The last time we saw him was, if I'm not mistaken, that was on the XCL GT4 Challenge. More on that in a moment, as we do have yellow flags out. It's the 993 in trouble. I believe that to be one of the owned cars. Let's see if we can catch on board, and it's with Neil Wagstaff. He's now down to 12th place, and he had trouble out through McPhillamy, down towards Skyline Hill. He does have a little bit of damage there on the 993 as well. And now Ericsson's up to 11th. Up and ahead of him. We'll see what the going rates are for Wagstaff in the 993. We'll stay on board with him as he makes his way down the Conrod. But yeah, fun fact with Benton, the last time we saw him was, I'm pretty sure, the XCL GT4 Challenge, where he entered with Chevrolet. Now he drives the course car. Part of the race control team for XCL. So he doesn't come into the pit lane. Wagstaff is convinced that the damage is not too severe, and 31 minutes left to go. He still has a chance to finish inside of the top 15 in this race. Right now, he looks at least in sizable enough condition to continue going. It doesn't look like anything too critical. Now, speaking of owned, here's Nico Shaska. We saw plenty of fights from Shaska not too long ago. He finds himself still inside the top 15. So it's still solid points coming up for owned racing out of this round of the championship. So a lot to consider heading into that second half of the championship. Now, to discuss it in detail, you won't be hearing it much from us anymore. This is the last time you'll be seeing a broadcast for the Pro Series Championship out of TRTN this season. This is our last broadcast for round 5, and then you'll have to tune in with the folks over on XCL TV with, I believe he's in the chat at the moment, with Tinus and his team as well. For the second half of the championship. It's been great working alongside these folks as well. We've been able to share data coming into the last couple of rounds, so there's been a lot to learn off of one another. And heading into that full second half of the season, you'll be with the folks over on XCL TV, starting off in Monza. Now, if I had to take bets here, because I'll be watching along the way in private for the rest of the series, there's a lot coming up that does excite me with this. Looking at it here, Monza, I mean, it's a track it's very easy to write off as just, oh, it's just going to be bad because it's Monza, because Monza accrues such a poor reputation in the sim racing community. Give it time, though. Give it time. Let it cook. It's a fantastic race. That'll be an hour of racing on December 20th. The last race in the Pro Series for 2025, and then they'll pick up where they left off on the 3rd of January in Spa. That's going to be a fantastic one as well. And a bit more of an underrated one, I want to draw attention to it. Paul Ricard at round 9. Sandwiched in between Kyle Army and Nordschleifer, two tough acts to improve on. Paul Ricard, I think it gets overhated. Of the very limited ensemble of races I've been able to cover out of Paul Ricard, things do stay surprisingly interesting. I think people write the track off a little too early because, unlike other French courses like the Circuit de la Sarthe or the Circuit Magny-Cours, it's just not as interesting. I beg to differ. It's an interesting little track. Give it the time and give it the space. Give it the conditions necessary, and keep it as far out of Formula 1 as you dare try it. That's where it gets its bad reputation from. Name to me the last time a French Grand Prix at Paul Ricard was of anything of note besides the one where Leclerc crashed. You can't. It's just not a memorable race. But in GTs, different story. Completely different story. Because you have the full Mistral. You don't have the chicane in the middle that upsets the balance of it. You have the full Mistral straight. You have the fun of a high-speed track. There's a lot coming up in that second half. It's been a real pleasure, though, to be able to cover the round here out of what has been a favourite of ours here on TRTN here at the Mount Panorama Circuit. It's up there in sort of what I unofficially have as the TRTN Holy Trinity for races, putting it up there with Silverstone. And I want to say as well, for the amount of times that racing has been really good out of it, I think I do have a bit of a negative opinion of Snetterton from a personal standpoint, but I can't deny the fact every single time we have broadcast an event out of Snetterton, the racing has been second to none, some of the best of the seasons we've covered for. So I have to put it in the Holy Trinity, which is a bizarre thing to say. For those of you who may know me personally, you know my opinions on Snetterton, so that's a really odd thing for me to say. Watch back any Snet race, you're not disappointed, and neither are we. So for good races, you've got Bathurst, Silverstone, and Snet. And Silverstone, I'd say, is a sleeper in this. It's overhated for GT fans. It's overhated for GT fans because I've noticed a lot of people in ACC not a big fan of Silverstone. I beg to differ. I think it's a brilliant track, and I am incredibly biased about it. Not even going to hide that one. So I'll be completely honest, not even hiding the fact that I am unimaginably biased towards Silverstone because I've been there several times. So you see here, this is the procession for the fight of 5th place, Rook v Lichka. With Zizek continuing to proceed up the road, very little chances of Lichka catching him now with 27 minutes left to go and double figures in terms of the gap. We must focus our minds to the next fight at play here, and let's see if we can get on board with the attacking of 2 angles here. Let's see if we can catch on with the Lamborghini of Ben Rook. Back into the fighting spirit. He's in 6th on the fight for 5th. Now, one of these days, just to touch back on a previous point, we will at some point officially make a TRTN Holy Trinity itinerary for some of the best races by venue, but in the unofficial one, I'm not ashamed to say, despite my thoughts of it, Snet's in there. But Bathurst, you never fail. It never fails to deliver on a fun race. And whether it's by the chaos it brings or the racing it provides, it's a moment-to-moment track that when you really get it at its sweetest point, delivers on some of the most fantastic spectacles of racing I've seen for GT. Can barely see anything there out of the windscreen for Ben Rook and the Lamborghini. Yeah, evidently the point there from Chris Rook that the washer and wiper isn't working, and it very nearly put him in the wall. He was looking for the button to find it. Ben Rook there, dropping a little bit of time. Now a second away from Tadeusz Lichka. There is still that consideration of a fight for 5th place, but in terms of matchups, Lamborghini once again find themselves on the short end of the proverbial stick because they're up against the straight line kings here. The Ford Mustang, the 7th generation model. It is an absolute bullet on the straightaways, as we've seen a universal law of ACC so far, with today being absolutely no different. And even in spite of less than beneficial balance of performance, that's been a bit of a routine theme here in the Pro Series. Ford's been on the short end of the stick, and they just don't care. I mean, the only way now to properly nerf the Mustang is to cut 2 cylinders out of it and give it an eco boost. It's really... or an Eco-Tech, sorry, that's the V6, isn't it? Eco-Boost is the 3-sil, if I'm not mistaken, that was in the Fiesta. But that too, that is also an option. The point is, you have to start cutting cylinders out of that engine if you want to start nerfing the Ford, because you could lump an entire ton on that car extra. It would probably still be top 5 material. I don't know what they are using to power that car, what they're feeding it, but it's just immense amounts of power. Little scrape of the wall there out of turn 2 for Ben Rook. The back end kicking up and away from him. He ran a very thin line there to potentially hit the wall. And speaking of hitting the wall, I think someone has hit the wall. Yellow flags are out. It's for the 992. That's one of the owned cars. Let's see if we can go and catch them here. This has happened down at Skyline. Actually down through the S is past Skyline. We see here from the 23's point of view. There you can see in front, that's Nico Shaska. We're watching from Wilson Zizek's point of view as he runs up towards the 992. We also see that Ben Rook was caught up in an incident not long ago, and he was back into the pit lane. So in the time we were opting to investigate what happened there for the 992, the 14 has seemingly run out of time. We don't know what happened. We know that there was an incident going on down between, I think it was Solman and McPhillamy at the time of the incident. But now we simply just don't know. And For those of you in chat potentially wondering, well, why can't we go back through the replay? To put simply, it will, and it's about 80% success rate, will crash the game. So we just don't want to run the risk of that. That's going to have to be something investigated post-race. The bottom line, the 14, is seemingly out of the line here. And that is a huge knock effect for the rest of the field. The 14, which was a serious competitor on the grid, out of this race, it leaves the position open to be inherited by Tyler Vermack, who now shifts up to 6th place. Rob Appleton's up to 7th. You've got a handy here to Rob Appleton. He's been a silent customer on this grid. He's found several positions by just not dying. He's been very, very reliable for staying alive on this track. He's had solid pace, top 10 material, and he's just been able to improve by being more consistent than everyone around him. He's been Oned's ace in the hole for this race so far, where the other Oned cars have struggled, such as the 993 and most recently now the 992. The 991 has seldom found issues like it. Rob Appleton into 7th then. Nicholas Dahl to 8th. Chris Grad to 9th. And then Joachim Eriksson to 10th place. I must say, this has definitely been quite an eye-opener, and it was 2 back-to-back almost guaranteed death rounds here. We went from a rainy Watkins Glen to just Bathurst, and as I've already illustrated this point several times, Bathurst is a dangerous place to be. Incredibly dangerous. Rain, shine, sun or sundown. It is a scary, scary track, and that is precisely why we love it. You see here a new fight potentially on the horizon here. 21 minutes to the checkered flag. Nico Shaska versus Daniel Karlborg, one to be considered at the last interval, 1.4 seconds. Now 1.3 as they're on the Conrod. The BMW is closing distance on the Porsche. That'll be one we keep in the back of our minds in the next couple of laps here. That's for 14th place. Looking here with Wilson Gige, he's into 4th place. Right now, the only current target to get ahead of is Andre Damrat, as that's the substitute for Tobias Sievert. Other than that, he is still going to lead this championship. There is no imminent threat for him to lose the championship lead by the time we head to round 6 of the championship. So that much he can rest with. Now, from this point onwards to the next 20 minutes time to the checkered flag is going to be a matter of can he improve over a 6.5 second gap to the back of the podium, currently being held on to just on the exit right now of Griffin's Bend by the Aston Martin on your screens of Carlos Diesch with 5-Star Esports. It would definitely be a stroke of redemption for the 5-Star Esports team to put a car up on the podium after how things panned out for them in their last big visit to Bathurst. For Carlos Diesch, it is a hope he relies on quite severely here at this time. Carlos Diesch in 11th place at the moment. Swiss talent just behind Joachim Eriksson. He'll be seeing a considerable boost in points where he stands, and throw on that drop point system later on in the championship. If he keeps form like this, there is nothing to say. Carlos Diesch cannot A, make his way into the top 10 of the championship, and B, make his way to the top 5. With some serious players plucked from the system here, among them Ben Rook, and looking on the itinerary as well, with Velocity fielding Lichka and Vermack, though I yet to see a replacement for Milliston. That does leave 2 spots open there, 3 when you consider Jake Garrett. Nicholas Dahl is being outscored. Levi Warner, I believe, is being substituted in the 4-2-3. If I take a look here, no, that's for the 9-2-3. So there is no substitute for him there. There are a lot of drivers set to drop a considerable chunk of positions by nature of simple no-show. And for the drivers that remain on the grid, there is a lot of points to grab. This is a smash and grab situation for that second half of the championship. We're staging ourselves into what could be a very exciting fight for several teams, among them the 5-Star Esports team that are set to make a proper offensive 4th into that top 10 after today's round. Courtesy first and foremost of Carlos Diesch, then looking further down the line for James Mason, and then further down the line from him, it's actually no. I believe Jan Bettentrup could be out of this race. So yes, it's just going to be for Diesch and for not for Bettentrup, and for Mason. Taking a look in that discussion as well, the elephant in the room. 10-second lead still on the charts here. 18 minutes to the checkered flag. Toby Cyril has not put a foot wrong in this race. You couldn't ask for a more perfect drive in Bathurst here. It is a tough track. a very tough track. A track so difficult drivers can't even wrap their heads around what it's like on an individual scale. It has to be compared to other tracks to make any sense of the challenge on display. Toby, Cyril and VXS have proven otherwise. This was not a mountain too high, it wasn't a valley too low, and they have done absolutely everything in their capacity to prove that. 17 minutes to the line, and for Toby Cyril, where he's 12th in the championship with 68 points and a joint 12th, mind you, with Aragoneses and Mason, he will be far from that, way up the order by the time we hit round 6 of the championship, if today is anything to go by. If memory does serve correct, looking at those timetables, again, this was out of qualifying. Bear in mind, this has quite a lot of an impact because it's extra points, 3 points to be specific, extra for pole position, of which Cyril has. Then looking in the race right now, the fastest lap point currently going to Wilson Gige. That's 3 more points over in Gige's direction, so even more damage mitigation for the championship lead. And for Cyril, this is just complete pay dirt. He's already got that pole position point. No one's taking that off of him. And now he's going to make maximum points out of the race. Actually, just a little under when you consider the no fastest lap. But there's still the option. There is still the option. Monitoring the gap now between Gige and Dish. It is 4.3 seconds. Now 4.6 there as we readjust past the timing lines. Nearest fight at the moment, Dahl v Grad. They're on their way down through the S's. See if we can catch on board here with Grad. Chasing down Nicholas Dahl of Frantic Motorsport. This is for 8th place. We'll stay on board with Chris Grad. With Blaze. This has really come as quite a surprise. You can see that it's been a real gamble for the setup on that Ferrari, or it's a case where Grad is running high downforce on his Mustang, because it's very rare to see anything outpace the Mustang, or at least keep it at arm's length for the longer time. But that 987 really did just do the impossible down the Conrod. In the last lap, though, you can see it's a case of 1.2 seconds almost between Dahl and Grad, with Grad faster. Something to also point out, the 993 in close proximity to another car, though I believe at this time that's the 194 of Alberto Aragoneses with SRC, so that's not a fight for position. The 993 Neil Wagstaff is 11th with Aragoneses in 18th place. Dahl v Grad, though, in towards the cuttings here. Ferrari and Ford, 2 legacy manufacturers in the world of motorsports, head-to-head here in Bathurst. With just under a quarter of an hour left to go, let's get one last look at the grid here before sundown. With Toby Cyril still leading the charge, but to draw attention to this, on what has been for the longest time 2 figures, has now in the closing quarter hour of racing dropped to beneath 10 seconds between himself and Andre Damrat. It could still rest highly on the chances here for VXS to take their first victory of the season, but there is going to need to be a serious drive forward now in the next quarter hour to make that possible. Dish 3rd with 5-Star Esports, but again by a narrowing margin to Wilson Gige, the championship leader, in 4th with the fastest lap so far. Tadeusz Lichka in 5th place with Tyler Vermack, his teammate at Velocity, in 6th. Rob Appleton in 7th with Nicholas Dahl in 8th. We see here currently fighting against Chris Grad on your screens in 9th place. All of this for 8th position. In 10th place, Joachim Eriksson with Frantic Motorsports with Neil Wagstaff in 11th. James Mason in 12th position with Matthew Williams in 13th. Nico Shaska in 14th with Daniel Carborg in 15th. Ellison Williams in 16th ahead of Stephen Sutton in 17th. And then rounding out 18 cars left on this grid after 9 DNFs is Alberto Aragoneses. Truly, it has been quite a bizarre ensemble for this race. I wasn't expecting the record to be, and I can't exactly remember how many DNFs we had in the last round. I can actually go back and check through the results to see just how many we were talking about there. And looking at Watkins Glen, just visit the website here to see what the results are. Now, we were talking in the range here by the looks of it, of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I think 8, perhaps even 9 DNFs. So we are very close to that record. Very, very close. In fact, looking at the amount of people that finished multiple laps down, it's hard to decipher where the line for DNFs was drawn. But we are very close to it, is the point we're trying to make. Still watching with Grad and Dahl. These two half a second from one another on the exit of Solman into McPhillamy. We stay on board here. On board with the 78 Mustang on the run downhill. It's hypnotic watching the runs on board with these drivers down through this section. It's so satisfying to see the line done well. Moreover, to watch two cars stay this close to one another at speeds that they're at in a section so narrow you could barely put a car on either side of it from where they stand. It is very, very impressive indeed. It's one of the most alluring factors of being here at Bathurst, is just watching the drivers in their element. Just under 12 minutes left to go. Functionally looking at about 6 more laps here before the end of the race. Out through the chase here, we see Grad still gaining on Dahl, but struggling to make amends on the grounds of a location for an overtake. He's following very well and he's got the pace for it, but against the Ferrari, he just can't outmaneuver that 296. The number 987 has got the leg up on him by just a smidge there. I mean, pace-wise, the Ford is still faster, but that is quickly a withering margin. And that last lap was about 85 thousandths, if memory serves correct there. It was a 790 over a 705. So this is quickly swinging out of Grad's favour. For the time being, it still is in his favour. But the first thing is, he's got to get around that Ferrari. It's all well and good being on the pace to overtake him, but now he's actually got to commit to the move. And with Nicholas Dahl, no fool to what an overtake is going to look like. He's going to be defending for his life here with very little time left to play for. Here in round 5 of the championship, Chris Grad has really got to dig deep for this move into 8th place. We'll stay on board with these two, taking a look around the field just briefly at potential other fights on the field. You'd be looking in the direction here of the fight for 3rd place. Wilson Gige versus Carlos Diche. This could be one to watch here as we quickly take one last look at Grad v Dahl before we try and get on board with the 23 Mustang. It won't be too far away if we are on the topic of Fords, and they're only 2 clicks away, so fantastic. We can stay right on board with both fights. This is for 3rd place then. Wilson Gige versus Carlos Diche, 5-star versus Fats GT. This could be redemption for the 5-star esports team, or it could be another podium appearance for Wilson Gige. Just quickly tapping back in on the fight here as they head down the Conrod Straight. This is Grad v Dahl. So in a moment where we've got the opportunity to take a look at what they're up to down through the chase, we see Dahl still holds on to 8th place, and Chris Grad very closely in pursuit for from 9th for 8th place. Looking up the inside here on Dahl, trying to fake him out towards Murray's. Actually, as it stands, he is going to commit for the move up the inside, but he won't have as much momentum over the Ferrari, so carrying that down into turn 1. Meanwhile, watching here with Gige and Diche, incredibly close action down Brock's Skyline into the S's and the Dipper. That Ford and that Aston almost hitched to one another there. You could assume a tow line was on the back of that Aston, and I'd believe you. Down towards Forest Elbow, a tiny twitch there. Did you see it under the braking? Kind of goes to show just how far Gige is willing to push the envelope out. Let's stay on board, though, with these two, because what looks like a move in the works here for Wilson Gige over Carlos Diche. It's V8 versus V8 Thunder in the land down under between Ford and Aston Martin. Down towards the chase we go. Still on board with Wilson Gige. Now on the inside for the run through to turn 20, but up to turns 21 and 22. Diche is still on the inside, looking to hold his position, but is ultimately forced out. Very little he could have done there. Longer onto the brakes. Wilson Gige made that one look very, very easy. But make no mistake, it has been stern challenge every step of the way here. And it's far from over, because what looked like an actually slightly better run for Diche on the exit of turn 23 is going to keep him in line of things on the run out of turn 1 if he can mirror that same magic. Out through turn 1, both of the drivers there taking a little chunk out of the curb. following in each other's wake here. Now, the Aston Martin, unlike other cars, can stay pretty decently close to the top end of the Mustang. It's got the gearing to do so, but in terms of doing it under its own steam, that's a broadly different question. It's a very tough matchup here because these two cars in the right conditions do handle remarkably the same, but it's one machine against another here when you're talking about a 6-year technical gap. 2018 Aston Martin against a 2024 Ford. It is a tough draw up here between Ford and Aston. You've got to hand it to Carlos Disch for keeping that 2018 vantage in such competitive stead throughout today. But could it be the requiem knell for 5 Stars' chances of a podium? Regardless of all of that, though, in 4th place, it's still going to provide ample chance here for Carlos Disch to surge through the top 10 coming in around 6. So there is still a silver lining to the dark cloud at play here. As we see, that was just... oh, that's explicit. They've got to put an 18+ warning on stuff like that. Get a look at the run down through that. That's different. That is just different gravy. That's millimeters. Literally millimeters. That's just explicit, that. That was unbelievable. Very few times have we seen someone launch it down through there. I think one other example was, I want to say it was Vermac. I can't remember which brand it was. I think it was Porsche. And he did a very similar move down through there. And it's just, when they get that close to the wall, that's different. Just different. Well, looking over on the other fights, Nicholas Dahl having since been passed up by Chris Grad. So sadly, we traded one opportunity to see him move over the other. That's our sincerest apologies for Grad and Dahl. They're now 1.4 seconds apart from one another, with Grad up to 8th. Looking for where the nearest fights are concerned, one potentially to consider Karlborg v Shaska for 14th on the grid, but that gap has now since opened up to 2 seconds. One fight, though, is Lichka v Vermac, now infighting amongst the Velocity team. Heading in towards turn 23, you can see the state of affairs on the nose of that 996. So for the 998 of Tyler Vermac, could it be that he's let by his teammate here? We watch with Tyler Vermac now looking to fight for what is currently 5th place on track. In the background, though, that was Stephen Sutton, who spun around at turn 1. Let's get a look at that on the replays here. In the bottom right-hand side, you'll still be able to see the fight going on for 5th place. But as you can see, following with all 3 of these drivers, yeah, it's the 41 just spun out through turn 1 there, was facing the wrong way up the pit lane road. Oh, that's all manner of twitching there from the 996. A little bit of desync plus a wider run through the cuttings has now allowed his teammate Tyler Vermac to surge on by into the top 5 up through Quarry, through turns 5 and 6. Now through Frog Hollow into Solomon Park. Up past the Wall of Death into McPhillamy Park, coming up here. This long left-hander. We've seen plenty of drivers stacking out through this area so far. Neither of these two looking to make the same mistake. Down through Skyline. And this was the driver we saw make magic of this earlier on. And you can see, once again, it's just such an impressive angle to see cars barrel down that run. We saw it out of Gige. Now we see it out of Vermac. Watching the drivers go hell for leather down that area is one of the best moments of coming to this track. You don't get bored of it. I assure you of that much. Nonetheless, Vermac to 5th. Four minutes left to go. So let's see if we can go and find what's going on with the race leader. We just briefly see here on what was the previous considerations for a fight of 14th have come asunder for Daniel Karlborg, having run over the exit there in the chase. Continues to keep Frantic Motorsport in the top 15, but he's sullied his chances in the last couple of minutes here to put himself in a fight of 14th against Nico Shaska of Owned Racing. Let's see if we can go and catch on board, though, with the race lead and see what's going on up front here. Separated again by 2 figures here, 10 seconds between himself and Andre Damrat, where there was that previous consideration of the gap dropping down. We were having that speculation on whether or not Damrat could have caught to Cyril by the end of this race. It has been swiftly reminded then by VXS and by Toby Cyril that that is simply not the case. Rumour and hearsay, says the 147, making his way down to the chase. It has been absolute domination here in Bathurst. With 3 minutes left to go, the next lap he does will be his last. So for Toby Cyril, we'll be catching on with him in a little while's time here. We take a look back around the grid to see from Chris Grad's point of view, Nicholas Dahl has started to reel him back in. That's less than a second between himself and the 9th place, number 987 Frantic Motorsports Ferrari of Nicholas Dahl. So his fight might not yet be over for Chris Grad. That is definitely something to keep in the back of our minds here as we take a look around the field. There is a big chunk of cars heading down towards turn 23. You can see there James Mason in 13th, now stuck in between 3rd and 4th on the grid. That's Wilson Gigé and his teammate Carlos Disch in the Aston Martin number 54 for 5-star. Out through turn 1 we go then. So given a little bit of free slipstream then by his teammate, this could actually play quite nicely into Carlos Disch's hand there, as he's given a bit of a tow up the mountain straight. Now 1.5 seconds from Wilson Gigé. We'll see how close that stays in the next lap coming. In terms of fights though, I mean, we are running a little bit thin here for fights now, as things have definitely simmered down, especially with a significant drop in the number of drivers on track. This is down to the survivors of Bathurst, let alone the finishing grid. I mean, taking a look here, 18 cars, where we started at 27. Want to talk slaughters? We thought we saw the bulk of it out in Watkins Glen. I think this was only the prelude to what was to follow here in round 5, because it was carnage for several drivers on the grid. Watching though, there's your top 3, and it's a Ford 1-2-3. I think we said it back in Imola. There were the fears of Ford dominance in the championship. It's why they put restrictor plates on them in Imola. And it was a case where we made the claim that we've yet to see a championship be outright dominated by Ford. Well, your fears have really come to reality here, folks, and so too have mine, because the blue oval is omnipresent at the front step, but, and this is the significant part, it has been dominated all of this season by Fats GT and Exclusive Esports. No other team has come along in this championship to defy what has been measured, almost imperial order by these two monolith teams. All except VXS Motorsport. A very bizarre chapter indeed. One that had only appeared on our radar in the time covering this series. Comprised of only a handful of drivers that we know of on our radar here. A few of them we've actually seen race before, back in events like the Sunday League. Toby Cyril, Martijn van Manen. Those are two names that ring the bell for us here. And as we see here with Toby Cyril, making his way out through Solomon towards McPhillamy. This is the final lap here, the final chapter of round 5. And I am still trying to piece together what it is I am seeing. Because against the odds here, against what was looking to be a bit of a clean sweep coming into round 5, a potential to pick up on the 75% win rate that Wilson Gigé has set in stone. It has been a very bizarre set of circumstances to gift us what we are seeing today. But one thing has been universally understood out of round 5 of the championship, and that is the absolute dominance VXS has brought to the land down under. Make no mistake about it, folks. This has been one of the most dominant performances we have ever seen in a championship such as this, with competition at an all-time high. I don't think anyone was expecting, and neither were we, as we accidentally brought up the wrong placard there. Nobody was expecting this coming into round 5, and that was their loss, because down towards turn 23, coming to the line to see the checkered flag in round 5 of the XCL Pro Series, Toby Cyril wins in Bathurst. An absolutely unbelievable result there. A bit of a kerfuffle from us, accidentally bringing up Martijn van Manen's placard. He's somewhere in the order down there. Actually, he might have been a DNF. But down towards the line, Andre Damrat for second. Wilson Gigé toes the line back to third here with the fastest lap damage mitigation for Fats GT. He'll still lead the championship heading to round 6, and he's done more than enough on this day. It's still redemption for 5-star Esports. Their last visit to Bathurst ended in tears. It ends with glory today. Carlos Disch in the top 5 is going to make a serious push through the top 10 in the championship heading into the second half. Coming to the line then, currently trailing on the back end of one of the BMWs there. I believe that to be one of the Frantic Motorsports cars. Here comes Tyler Vermaak, and what has been a really solid performance to walk away from today in that 998 for the Velocity Racing team, heading down towards the line ahead of his teammate Tadeusz Lichka. Here comes Tyler Vermaak in the top 5 here in Bathurst. We'll get the full results out in a moment's time. What a performance today by Toby Cyril. Our apologies for the slight technical difficulties in regards to the placards. It might be omitted from the YouTube release if we can, but if not, then know that it was a humble mistake in the efforts to deliver that speech there. Really, we had never seen anything quite like it. We thought it would have been measured control, and I think that was to everyone's loss, because no one was expecting VXS to surge through and to find their way to the front, but it has been total world domination here in Bathurst for Toby Cyril. There's your final results then out of round 5 of the championship before any kind of penalty investigation from race control. Toby Cyril wins in Bathurst for VXS Motorsport, their first win in the Pro Series in that 147 Mustang. Andre Damrat subbing in for Tobias Sievert makes second place for Exclusive Esports, with Wilson Gige of Fatch GT in third with the fastest lap. Carlos Disha, 5-Star Esports, in fourth place, with Tyler Vermaak of Velocity Racing in fifth. Further down the order then, Lichka 6th, Appleton 7th, Grad 8th, Dahl 9th, Ericsson 10th, Wagstaff 11th, Williams, that being Matthew Williams, in 12th, Mason 13th, Shaska 14th, Karlborg 15th, Williams, as in Ellison Williams, 16th, and then Stephen Sutton in 17th. And you can see quite the multitude of DNFs here. I mean, it's been slaughter. Among them, Rook, Farr, somewhat there says Aragoneses, but also shows him at the checkered flag, and you can actually see he's in the pit lane, so it does count him as a finish there. Van Manen, Radic, Copsey, Madrano, Hemming, Bettentrup and Faris. So a very sizable death toll out of Bathurst. But as the sun sets yonder the horizon here at Mount Panorama, Toby Cyril takes his first race win of the season. He gives VXS their first in the Pro Series. But it continues the narrative of Ford dominance. Not a single driver, if my memory does serve correct, has come through to do what has been done today in anything that's not come from Detroit. Ford has dominated this championship. The fears have since become reality. So whether you're a Ford fan or a Ford critic, one thing is universally understood. If it ain't Ford, it ain't first. That's all from us here on TRTN. What a time it has been. I must say, it's been a real pleasure to come and work with the folks at the Xbox Community League, to collaborate on this series and work side by side with the folks over on XCL TV. This has really been quite a time to be here in the XCL Pro Series, and really from us personally, I don't think I've ever seen a grid so lively and with so many recognisable talents. I've seen so many of these drivers. This is from a personal standpoint. In the time working in commentary, I've seen so many of these drivers in so many different places that it's fantastic to see this almost merging of the minds here, this huge crossover between so many different places come together under the veil of motorsport, and it has been such a pleasure from us. But all is not yet over in this series. I know it may be sounding like it's coming to an end, but it's only coming to an end for us here on TRTN. The show must go on, and the second half of the championship can be found in its entirety over on XCL TV for the rest of the season, starting from the 20th of December onwards. Then there'll be the season break in towards January of 2026, with it set to wrap up on the 21st of February 2026 at the Nürburgring Nordschleife, according to no further delays. That's all from us here, though, on TRTN. And thank you so much for watching. It's been a real pleasure from us here. Take care. Good night.